Chapter 2:15. However, Shu Luan could not help but secretly admire their unremitting spirit. Looking at those people working in an orderly manner, Shu Luan and Kitty had already distributed the extra rations they brought with them. Although it was not of much use, it was better than nothing. Shu Luan originally wanted to help them hunt some wild animals, but he was stopped by Yin Lu. Yin Lu's reason was very simple. When Yen Bing left, he specially instructed him to be in charge of all the logistics work. If they casually ate other things, it would be equivalent to disobeying the orders of the Blood Lion cult. This kind of thing, the disciples of the Blood Lion cult would definitely not do. Even the rations that Shu Luan gave them were only distributed to a few of his weakest subordinates who could not hold on. Therefore, Shu Luan could only dismiss this idea. He let them continue to work hard. Big brother Shu Luan, it's been 2 days. Why hasn't big brother Yen Bing come back yet? Didn't he say that he would be back in 2 days? Where did he go? Kitty looked around. Shu Luan smiled and said, "Your big brother Yen Bing has always been considerate. Since he said that he would be back in 2 days, then he will definitely be back today. I think he should be preparing the logistics work. This time, he will definitely bring back some food. After all, these people have been hungry for 2 days. They still have to consume a lot of food every day. If this goes on, I'm afraid that not many people can hold on." Just as they were talking, a red light was emitted from the top of the snow mountain. The light almost covered the entire top of the snow mountain. In an instant, the sound of fighting aura became denser. Various colors of fighting aura burst out continuously. It was as gorgeous and moving as fireworks. Kitty smiled and said, "It must be that guy again. It really knows how to be lazy. It doesn't do anything at all. It just keeps releasing its ability." Shu Luan said, "This is already not bad. If it wasn't for your fox's help, their mission would have been very difficult. I'm afraid that their mission to destroy the mountain will become even more difficult. It's a pity that we can't see it from below. Perhaps that cow of yours is also helping them up there. Fortunately, I didn't let your other pets go up together. Otherwise, their mission would have been much easier." As he was speaking, Si Luan's expression suddenly changed. His gaze instantly turned sharp as he looked towards a spot not far away from him. Kitty was talking to Si Luan face to face when she saw him suddenly stop talking and look to the side. Furthermore, the aura on his body had clearly become sharper. She couldn't help but follow his gaze. What Zhu Luan was looking at was an empty space. There was nothing there. Just as Kitty was puzzled, the air in the area Shun Luan was looking at suddenly twisted slightly. Under Kitty's surprised gaze, a faint silver light lit up, and a silver door appeared out of thin air. The silver light fluctuated in a circular shape. A tall figure stepped out from behind the door. With a smile on his face, he appeared in front of them. Who else could it be but Yen Bing? Brother Yen Bing. Kitty pounced forward excitedly, grabbing Yen Bing's large hand and shaking it vigorously. "Big brother, you're finally back. Kitty misses you. Big brother Xing Luan said that you went to prepare food. What did you bring back? Did you bring back something delicious for Kitty?" Kitty didn't slack off these 2 days. She has been diligently practicing spiritual magic. Yen Bing smiled slightly and said, "It's good that you didn't slack off. Of course, Big Brother brought back something delicious. Come, these are for you." A silver light flashed in his hand, and a large bag of food appeared out of thin air. Kitty took it and eagerly opened the bag. Inside were all kinds of snacks, all unique to Ice Moon City. Kitty excitedly jumped up and kissed Yen Bing's face. "Brother Yen Bing is the best." Yen Bing smiled slightly and said, "Big brother Xing Luan, nothing happened these 2 days, right?" Si Luan said, "Your subordinates are working very hard. Where did you go? How did you come back using spatial magic?" Yen Bing said, "Only spatial magic can allow me to come back in the shortest time possible. This time, I didn't go in vain. I left a spatial positioning there. In the future, I won't need to fly over for a long time." It turned out that before he left, he used magic to leave his spiritual imprint here for the purpose of positioning. After reaching the destination, he first used spatial magic to return to Ice Moon City, where he left a spatial positioning. He bought some food for Kitty before rushing back here. Si Luan said, "Your subordinates are starving. Hurry up and get them some food. Otherwise, I don't think they have any fighting strength left." Nian Bing, isn't it a little too difficult for them to dig this snow mountain? Even if it's a swordsman-level expert, an all-out attack can only break a few feet of this hard snow mountain. Moreover, their do qi is still limited. Nian Bing smiled slightly and said, "It's precisely because it's difficult that I let them do it. Otherwise, there won't be any effect. I asked them to carry out this extermination operation not only to increase their strength, but also to help them build up their confidence. Big brother, just wait and see. It won't be long before the benefits of this extermination operation become apparent. It's time to get them something to eat." As he said that, a yellow light lit up in Nian Bing's hand and poured into the ground below his feet. Under the control of his enormous spiritual energy, the ground began to tremble slightly. The soil rolled up and condensed continuously, forming a huge stove. In a flash of silver light, a large pot with a diameter of nearly 3 feet appeared out of thin air and steadily landed on the stove. This large pot was specially made by Nian Bing when he came to Ice Moon City. It was also because of this pot that he delayed a few hours. Smiling slightly, Nian Bing's eyes revealed a faint light. The ice element condensed in the pot. With the help of the fire element, in a short while, half of the pot of clear water appeared. At this time, Kitty was already happily eating her snacks at the side. As she ate, she also looked at Nian Bing's movements. The silver light in Nian Bing's hand appeared again. Dark green, fist-sized things fell into the pot. Zhu Luan roughly counted that there were dozens of them. Nian Bing's left hand flickered with fire and the stove immediately became hot. Under the rapid heating of his fire magic, half of the pot of clear water boiled in a short while. With a flick of his fingers, several wind elements floated into the pot and crushed those dark green things. Suddenly, the clear water in the pot turned into a pot of dark green juice. A pungent fishy smell floated out. Zhu Luan frowned slightly. He couldn't help but take a few steps back. Kitty also smelled the fishy smell from the pot. She couldn't help but run to the side and said, "It smells so bad. Nian Bingij, what is this? The food you made before was very delicious." Nian Bing smiled and said, "It's different this time. I'm not going to cook for them. Moreover, it's not suitable for them to eat delicacies now. Too much comfort and enjoyment will numb their nerves. As the saying goes, bitter medicine cures illness. Anyway, it's not for you to drink." The greenish-black liquid continued to boil, and the pungent smell became even more intense. Nian Bing raised his head and looked at the snowy mountain peak. A divine light flashed in his eyes as he said, "Yin Zue, order all of my followers to gather here immediately. Everyone." His voice wasn't loud, but under the effect of his mental power, it was transmitted to the mountain peak that was thousands of feet away. When they heard Nian Bing's voice, they immediately rushed over. Yin Zue, who was training, immediately led his men down from the mountain. At the same time, he also sent out a signal to his followers who were cultivating. In a short while, 101 people appeared in front of Nian Bing. Nian Bing's gaze swept across them. Everyone, including Yin Zue, looked pale. It was obvious that they had overexerted themselves. They still had to work hard to split the mountain in this world of ice and snow. It was indeed difficult for them. 101 people saw the big pot in front of them and smelled the nauseating fishy smell in the pot. Although they straightened their backs, they couldn't hide the fatigue on their faces. Nian Bing had stopped the flame in his hand, and the dark green juice in the pot stopped boiling. A silver light flashed in Nian Bing's hand and a ladle appeared. He walked in front of Yin Zue and handed him the ladle. He said calmly, "Starting from you, everyone has to drink 3 ladles. You're not allowed to spit it out. After drinking, immediately sit here and cultivate. Inzue was stunned. He looked at the big pot in confusion and asked subconsciously, Chief, can that thing be eaten? Nian Bing smiled faintly and said, Do you really think that I'm feeding you poison? Wind and Moon Mobile Reading Network. I can tell you frankly that this thing doesn't taste good, but you must drink it. Don't you want to drink it? Inzue shook his head and said, Not to mention that it tastes bad, even if it's really poison, we won't disobey your order, Chief. As he spoke, he strode to the pot and scooped up a big ladle of the dark green juice. He closed his eyes and put it into his mouth. Although he drank it resolutely, he finally understood what Nian Bing meant when he said it tasted bad. It was the first time in his life that he had tasted something so disgusting. The taste was indescribable. Perhaps even feces and urine would not taste so disgusting. The stench was sour and astringent, and the most unbearable thing was the extremely bitter taste. After not eating for 2 days, Inzue felt his stomach churn when he suddenly tasted something so disgusting. His face instantly turned paler, and his chest heaved up and down. Just as he was about to vomit, a gentle energy suddenly poured into his back. The pure and comfortable light element gently flowed into every corner of his body, forcefully suppressing the surging juice. Inzue's face alternated between red and white, and he finally managed to suppress the urge to vomit. Looking at the pot of smelly juice in front of him, a swordsman like him could not help but reveal a trace of fear. Was this something that humans could drink? What exactly did the cult leader bring? Just as he was hesitating, Nian Bing's voice came from behind him. Quick, there are 2 more ladles. If Inzue was full of courage when he drank the first ladle, he did not have the courage to drink any more. He turned around and looked at the calm Nian Bing. He smiled bitterly and said, Chief, can I not drink it? This. Nian Bing's face was very calm, but her tone was unusually firm. No, you must drink it. This is an order. Could it be that the disciples of the Blood Lion Church are not even afraid of death, but afraid of this pot of soup? Soup? How could this be called soup? Inzue was still a little hesitant, and his mouth was still filled with the bitter taste. His expression changed again, and he finally reached out for the second ladle. The stinky juice was once again sent into his mouth. It was still sour, bitter, and extremely unpalatable. However, when he sent the juice into his stomach for the second time, he suddenly felt a cool aura rising from his lower abdomen. The nausea that he was supposed to feel did not reappear. Although the bitter taste still made him grimace, it was not as bad as when he drank the first ladle. He did not stop at all. Since it tasted so bad, rather than savoring the bitter taste bit by bit, he might as well finish it in one go. He immediately scooped up another spoonful and swallowed it. After he finished scooping up 3 spoonfuls, he could not help but heave a sigh of relief. The refreshing aura in his body had also become exceptionally clear. When he saw the satisfied look in Nian Bing's eyes, he nodded at his subordinate. Another martial saint walked over and took the spoonful from him. Since Inzue had set an example, no one could refuse to drink it. Just as the second person was about to drink it, Inzue suddenly felt the cool aura in his lower abdomen gradually become hot. The burning sensation felt as if it was going to burn his meridians. In his surprise, he could not help but look at Nian Bing. Nian Bing took a step forward, raised a hand, and pressed on Inzue's shoulder as she said, "Sit down at the side and cultivate where you are. You have to remember that you have to endure hardships to become a man above others. Yes, I'm afraid the taste of this pot of juice is much worse than anything you've ever drunk before. But I want you to drink it. After experiencing the bitterness now, you'll become stronger no matter what you encounter in the future." As he said that, he slapped the back of the swordsman who was about to spit out the juice after drinking it, forcing him to swallow it. Inzue had already walked to the side and sat on the ground to cultivate. The second swordsman's willpower was not as strong as Inzue's. When he was forced to drink the first spoonful of juice by Nian Bing's innate qi, he felt the world spinning around him. The pain in his stomach made him want to die, and he did not have the courage to drink any more. However, Nian Bing had no intention of letting him go. Under the effect of her powerful mental energy, she directly restrained his body. Next to her, Ma Lu, who had received Nian Bing's signal, forced him to drink another 2 spoonfuls of juice. Just like that, he had completed his task. Feeling the cool aura in his body, the swordsman felt as if he had taken a trip to hell. When Ma Lu released the Heaven's Eye domain and brought him to the side, he felt as if his entire body was about to collapse. He sat down beside Yin Zue and immediately began to cultivate. Nian Bing waved her hand and the third person walked over. Drinking this fishy juice had little to do with one's strength. More importantly, it depended on one's willpower and courage. From the first Silver Claw to the last great swordsman, Nian Bing had been observing them. Generally speaking, these elites of the Ice Moon Hall had good willpower. At least, none of them really resisted. When the last person drank 3 spoonfuls of the juice, there wasn't much left in the pot. The 101 people sat around the pot. A faint glow of battle chi surrounded their bodies. They were all in a state of cultivation. Halogen said in a low voice, "Nian Bing, you're really ruthless." Looking at them, I'm afraid this juice is not ordinary. Nian Bing smiled and said, "Brother Halogen, there's still a little left. Why don't you drink it? If you haven't really tasted it, you won't be able to feel the real taste." Halogen waved his hand and said, "Forget it. I don't have the tendency to torture myself. Why don't you drink it? If you're willing to drink it, I'll drink it with you." Nian Bing's eyes flashed as he looked at his subordinates sitting around him. He didn't say anything as he grabbed the edge of the pot with both hands and lifted it up. Then, he placed his mouth next to the pot and tilted it before he started to gulp down the soup. He actually drank 7 to 8 mouthfuls in a row. When he passed the pot to Zhu Lu, his expression didn't change at all. It was as if it was just an ordinary soup. Halogen looked at Nian Bing with a dumbfounded expression. He wanted to find a flaw in her expression, but he was disappointed. Nian Bing didn't change at all. She was still looking at him with a smile. Halogen clenched his teeth and copied Nian Bing. When the first mouthful of the juice entered his mouth, his body couldn't help but stiffen. However, he didn't stop and continued to drink the rest of the juice. Nian Bing endured the boiling in her chest and abdomen. Halogen, who had lived on the continent of gods, had a willpower that couldn't be compared to ordinary people. With a bang, Halogen put the pot on the stove and took in big mouthfuls of cold air. What the F***, what the F***? Nian Bing, is this thing for humans to drink? Nian Bing laughed and said, "It's not for humans to drink? At least 103 of us have drunk it. Let's call it a man's soup. Only a real man dares to drink it." Halogen glared at Nian Bing grumpily. Suddenly, the look in his eyes changed from dissatisfaction to surprise. "Nian Bing, what is this? It feels so comfortable," he cried out. His strength was naturally not something that Yin Hao and the others could compare with. Under the effect of the enormous fighting energy in his body, Halogen could clearly feel a scorching current nourishing his meridians. His whole body felt warm and comfortable, as if every strand of muscle was filled with strength. Even the speed of his fighting energy had become faster along with the circulation of his blood and qi. It should be noted that Halogen had been cultivating on the continent of gods for many years. Even spirit herbs had little effect on him. But, after drinking the soup, he immediately felt the nourishing effect, which greatly surprised Halogen. Only now did he understand how good Nian Bing was to his subordinate. Naturally, something that could produce such an effect was not an ordinary thing. Nian Bing had brought him so much soup. Although the taste was unpleasant, the effect was enormous. Nian Bing smiled and said, "I've eaten this thing a long time ago. It is because of its effect that I can have a body that is much stronger than ordinary magicians. The dozens of dark green things he brought back were actually the gallbladders of iron-striped snake that Garamandes the Fire Dragon King had given him. Iron-striped snake was a creature that could only be found in the heaven-shaking mountain range. It had a tough body, extraordinary strength, and a strange venom. Its gallbladders were definitely a great tonic. Nian Bing had eaten quite a lot with the help of Garamandes back then. Even though he had never cultivated battle chi, his body had become abnormally tough. After Nian Bing left here 2 days ago, his destination was the heaven-shaking mountain range. At that time, he had hunted dozens of iron-striped snakes and brought back the precious prey. Because the heaven-shaking mountain range had the existence of the Fire Dragon human clan and was Garamandes's nest back then, there were very few people. As a powerful species, iron-striped snake had flourished at that time. Therefore, although Nian Bing had no experience in catching snakes, he had brought these back very quickly. Halogen gave Nian Bing a thumbs up. Good stuff, it feels really good after drinking it. Just as you said, good medicine tastes bitter but cures the illness. Next time, if there's more, I'll have to drink more. Nian Bing smiled and said, Big brother, with your physique, drinking this won't have much of an effect. However, for us subordinates, the effect is very good. Alright, now that we've finished drinking the bitter stuff, it's time to get some food for them. Otherwise, when they wake up from their cultivation, they'll definitely say that I, the sect leader, am unkind. As he said that, silver light flashed in his hand, and one after another, thick iron-striped snake carcasses appeared out of thin air. Kitty was originally eating her delicious snacks excitedly. She didn't even notice when Zun and the others drank the fishy juice. Suddenly, she saw so many snake carcasses. Out of the girl's nature, she couldn't help but scream and quickly hid behind Halogen. A slight fluctuation appeared in the air. Including Fox Nana and Cow Whitey, her 5 pets appeared almost at the same time. Each of them looked around as if they were facing a great enemy. Kitty's spiritual power had been raised to a very high level. When she was in danger, her pets would automatically appear to protect her. Nian Bing smiled and said, Kitty, don't be afraid. These are all dead. Look, it's your fox who knows what's good for her. As he spoke, he looked at the 5 pets that had already reached the 5th grade. He couldn't help but be surprised. The powerful aura of these 5 big guys didn't seem to be any weaker than the demonic beasts he brought back from the godly mainland. Although their attack power might not be stronger than those demonic beasts in the godly mainland, but from their aura and energy fluctuations, these 5 pets seemed to have a special cooperation. Just like now, when the fox rushed towards the pile of iron snake corpses as if it had seen a beautiful fox, the sweet aura of the dark demon mouse became abnormally sharp. The light body of the cow stood up, revealing its 8 golden breasts. The pink pig guan also took a few steps forward. Its big ears opened to the sides of its body, as if it was ready to pounce at any time. The cockroach's strong body was behind the other pets, but there was an unstable energy fluctuation around its body. The fox didn't hold back at all. It picked up a smaller iron snake and ran back. Its front claws were very sharp. Even the iron snake's tough skin was cut open by its claws. The fox opened its mouth, and there was a bit of greed in its obscene eyes. It ate the snake meat in big mouthfuls. The iron snake's gallbladder was naturally the best treasure, but it also had a very good nourishing effect. Nian Bing's eyes flickered with a strange light. 7 shadow puppets appeared at the same time. The light emitted by the 7 divine blades brought a dense mist to the flat ground. Under the control of Nian Bing's spiritual power, the 7 shadow puppets moved at the same time, pouncing on the pile of iron snake corpses. 7 colored lights flashed at the same time. Under the guidance of Nian Bing's spiritual power, they had already started their work. Tu gradually woke up from his cultivation. His whole body was warm and indescribably comfortable. The chi and blood in his body were peaceful. The cold and hunger of the past 2 days seemed to have completely disappeared at this moment. His spirit was even better than when he first came to this snowy mountain. What is this smell? Ian too, who had just woken up, didn't even have time to open his eyes. He took a deep breath. It smells so good. 101 elites of the Ice Moon Hall woke up one after another. What they saw was dozens of huge wooden shelves. On each wooden shelf, there was a strange-looking large strip of meat. Nian Bing stood not far away, her hands emitting dozens of cyan light beams. Those light beams coiled around those wooden shelves and slowly rotated. Behind each wooden shelf, there was a red flame. Strangely, these flames weren't caused by anything, as if the air was their fuel. The strong aroma was emitted from these roasted meat. Master! Ian too walked to Nian Bing's side and called her respectfully. Even the stupidest person could now understand that the fishy juice they had drunk earlier must be something good. At the very least, their exhaustion had been alleviated. Even though they had only cultivated for less than 2 hours, the effects were surprisingly good. The comfortable feeling that they were experiencing greatly increased the confidence of these Ice Moon Hall elites in Nian Bing. Nian Bing smiled and said, "The fishy juice doesn't taste good, does it? You'll get your compensation soon. These roasted meat are juicy. You don't need to brush it with oil, as I don't have time to buy more seasonings. But the meat itself is very tender. As long as you control the heat well and sprinkle some salt on it, the taste will be very good. There are too many of you, so just make do with it." Although he had a profound magic cultivation base, it was indeed a little difficult for him to cook for hundreds of people. Therefore, he could only roast the meat with the help of the wind element magic. These strips of meat in front of him were the meat of the iron thread snakes after being skinned by the 7 puppets. These iron thread snakes were of different sizes, but the meat was enough for these over 100 people to eat for 3 to 5 days. Smelling the aroma, these warriors, who hadn't eaten for 2 days, couldn't help but open their eyes wide. It took Nian Bing a lot of time to deal with the poison on the fangs of these iron thread snakes and clean their bodies. Otherwise, it wouldn't take her so long to roast them. Looking at the eager faces of these subordinates, Nian Bing couldn't help but laugh. "Are you in a hurry to eat? Take some salt and sprinkle it evenly on the meat. It'll be ready in a while." With a wave of her hand, dozens of salt jars appeared out of thin air. Among the seasonings, the most important one was undoubtedly salt. Other seasonings would bring changes to the food, but salt was absolutely essential. Salt was the most delicious of all seasonings. In the eyes of ordinary people, salt was perhaps the most common and unspecial of all seasonings. However, without salt, even Nian Bing would not be able to make perfect food. "Brother Nian Bing, you're so naughty." Kitty pulled Nian Bing's sleeve unhappily. Fortunately, Nian Bing's spiritual power was strong enough. Otherwise, with her pulling, the roasted meat would have gone out of control. Nian Bing said in surprise, "Kitty, what's wrong with you? What did brother do to make you unhappy?" Since he came back, Kitty had been eating non-stop. Why was she blaming him? Kitty pouted and said, "Of course you're naughty. You're the one who bullied me. If you said earlier that you could roast meat, Kitty wouldn't have eaten so many snacks just now. Now I can't eat too much roasted meat. You have to compensate me." Nian Bing couldn't help but smile and joke. "I thought it was because of something. So it's like this. Brother Nian Bing didn't do it on purpose. You didn't ask me if I could cook. You just have to eat less later. We'll stay here for 2 more months. I'll make sure you eat to your satisfaction. However, Kitty, don't eat too much. Otherwise, you'll become a little fat cat." Kitty Nianbing stuck out her tongue and said unhappily, "You're a little fat cat. My figure is so good. I won't get fat at all. Besides, it's so cold here. How can I not eat more to increase my calories?" The roasted meat was finally done. Just as Nian Bing said to start eating, the 101 warriors, including Yin Zun, had already pounced on the meat like wolves and tigers. At this time, the concept of status didn't seem to be important. Inzun's hand was a little slower, and the piece of meat that was about to reach his hand was already torn away by his subordinate. However, although the warriors were all hungry, they still left the largest roasted snake for Nian Bing and the other two. They didn't understand this rule. Halogen didn't stand on ceremony. He stood beside the roasted snake and tore the meat into pieces while laughing loudly. Kitty's eating speed wasn't any slower than his. The way she ate was even more ferocious than Halogen. It didn't seem like she had said that there was no place to eat. As for her pets, although they were all very hungry, they could only watch helplessly with Kitty around. Soon, Kitty made Nian Bing understand what it meant to be able to fight continuously. Although her eating speed was far slower than Halogen's, she didn't stop eating from Halogen until he was full. She had already asked for a small knife from Halogen. She ate very cleverly, especially on the crispy parts. Although her hands and face were covered in oil, she ate happily and didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. Although Nian Bing was also eating with them, she didn't eat as fast as them. While eating, she couldn't help thinking of Feng Nu. If Feng Nu were here, she might be able to eat even more. The iron thread snake lived in the sky-shaking mountain range. Its meat was tender and juicy, and when it was roasted, it emitted a special aroma that made one forget to leave. Although Nian Bing had only added some salt, the aroma of the iron thread snake was accentuated. The delicious roasted meat made every warrior of the Ice Moon Hall feel as if they were eating a delicacy that they had never tasted before. Chapter 216. Of course, this might have something to do with the bitter soup they had drunk earlier. After all, the contrast was too strong. In their excitement, this meal lasted for a full hour. Although the warriors were like hungry wolves, there were too many iron thread snakes. Even the smallest snake was more than 10 feet long. In the end, they only ate about 1/5 of the snake meat. Without needing Nian Bing to say anything, the rest of the snake meat was stored in the ice caves that had been dug out long ago on the glacier. The snake that Nian Bing and her companions ate was the biggest one, and it also consumed the most of Nian Bing's fire magic power. When Nian Bing, Kitty, and Halogen were full, there was still most of the 30 feet long iron wire snake meat left. Kitty waved her hand, and her 5 precious pets immediately rushed up. The fastest one was naturally the obscene fox, while the others were slower. Who said that cows only ate grass? Kitty, the milk cow, ate as much meat as the other pet. Among the 5 pets, Chrysanthemum Pig Guan and Dark Demon Rat Sweetie had the strongest fighting strength. Relying on their tall and strong bodies, they occupied the best positions and even ate the snake bones. The most pitiful one was the phantom golem, Qiang Qiang. It had a congenital defect, and its mouth was much smaller than the other 4 pets. Although it was not small in size, its eating speed was much slower. After storing the snake meat, Yin Tu and his subordinates lined up neatly in front of Nian Bing, waiting for orders. Nian Bing looked up at the snow mountain that did not seem to have changed much, and said indifferently, "Your strength should have recovered and your stomachs should be full. It's time to continue the extermination operation. Don't think that I've given you an impossible task. As long as you keep working hard, you'll see miracles happen. Alright, you can go now. From tomorrow onwards, the 3 groups will take turns to exterminate the mountain." "Yes, sect leader." After filling their stomachs, the warriors were filled with confidence. They headed towards the peak of the snowy mountain under Yin Zue's lead. Nian Bing couldn't help but smile as he watched their backs. "Soon, you will feel the difference." Seeing that the warriors had all left, he found a place to sit down cross-legged and began to cultivate in silence. The 7-colored halo formed a protective barrier, resisting the cold wind. Just as Nian Bing had thought, when the mountain extermination operation started again. Yin Mang and the rest immediately felt that something was different. In the past, they would need to rest after 6 or 7 times of all-out attack. This time around, however, they were still full of energy after continuously launching 10 Dochi attack. Moreover, they were surprised to discover that their strength seemed to have increased by a lot. When the Do Chi bombarded the mountain, the power was significantly stronger than before. At first, these warriors did not pay much attention to it, but after a day, when the entire mountain was blown up by 3 feet, they immediately realized the changes in their bodies. They all thought of the same thing, the fishy liquid. That fishy liquid was the most suspicious thing. Both Yin Tu and his subordinates could not help but feel grateful to Nian Bing, the young sect leader. It should be known that a warrior could only increase his strength through continuous cultivation and actual combat. However, after following Nian Bing to this world of ice and snow, their strength had increased to varying degrees in just a few days. Originally, they did not have the slightest confidence in the mountain extermination operation, but now they began to look forward to their own situation when the training ended in 2 months. The increase in their enthusiasm immediately increased their efficiency. 7 days later, on the 10th day since the Ice Moon Hall's team entered the mountain range, a snow eagle flew over from the direction of Ice Moon City just as the sun rose. The snow eagle was a kind of eagle unique to the Ice Moon Empire. It was ferocious and only lived in cold areas. Once it was tamed, it would become the best companion of its master. This snow eagle could be said to be Yin Tu's treasure. After reading the letter brought by the snow eagle, he immediately came down from the top of the mountain to find Nian Bing. Sect leader, the blood guards have arrived. Nian Bing was refreshed when she heard Yin Tu's reply. She said with satisfaction, "That's fast." Yin Tu smiled and said, "Sect leader's order is of course fast. As soon as the 7 elders received your order, they sent 500 blood guards to Ice Moon City day and night. Now, they are on standby at the headquarters of my Ice Moon Hall. Do you think we should ask them to come over now?" Yin Tu's eyes flickered with a faint light. 10 days had passed. Nian Bing had left 3 times, and they had drunk the fishy juice 3 times. Since they knew the miraculous effect of the fishy juice, no one complained anymore. Every time they saw the pot of fishy juice, they felt as if they had seen the most precious treasure in the world, and the taste of the juice did not seem so bad. In the span of 10 days, their growth rate was unimaginable. This was especially so for their physical strength and the purity of their Do Chi. During the process of continuously chopping down the mountain, they had been greatly improved. Coupled with the nourishment from the iron wire snake and the snake meat, these warriors were becoming more and more confident. Since the beginning of the mountain extermination operation, other than the 1,000 feet that Nian Bing had chopped down at the beginning, they had already successfully chopped down 20 feet of the mountain. Although the mountain was getting thicker and thicker, they still maintained a certain speed. This proved that their strength was continuously increasing. Nian Bing smiled and shook her head. She said, "No need. I'll go to Ice Moon City and bring them here. I can also see how the things I want are over there. Yin Tu, I'll leave the command here to you. I'll be back by tonight at the latest." She did not know how things were over at Ice Moon City and how many things had been prepared by Yin Feng. That was the key. After all, no matter how much these warriors trained, it was impossible for them to be able to fight against a deity in a short 2 months. This required him to design something. If he could succeed, even if it was just him and Bu Luan, it would be enough. Yin Tu said, "Sect leader, don't worry. Recently, the brothers have become more and more confident. There's no need to deliberately remind them. Each of them is working hard. To be honest, from the time I started to practice martial arts until now, these 10 days have been my fastest improvement. Sect leader, thank you for giving this opportunity to our Ice Moon Hall. Don't worry, the brothers of Ice Moon Hall will do their best to complete the mission." Nian Bing smiled and said, "Sweat more in normal times and bleed less in battle. I've already told you what we will face in 2 months. Hall Master Yin, for the lives of our brothers, you have to work harder." Nian Bing left Halogen here and brought Kitty back to Ice Moon City using spatial magic. After staying here for 10 days, it was hard for Kitty to be able to focus on cultivating her spiritual magic. This time, Ice Moon City could also let her relax. Nian Bing did not leave for long. From morning to evening, when the sky had just turned dark, he had already returned with Kitty. The silver door flashed in the air. Kitty was the first to jump out, followed by Nian Bing. Halogen smiled and welcomed them. Just as he was about to speak, he saw dark red figures coming out one by one. They did not make any sound. When these people appeared, Halogen was shocked, because he felt a biting cold aura from these people. Although the murderous aura was completely restrained, these warriors wearing dark red warrior clothes and carrying thin swords left a deep impression on him. These people looked to be around 30 years old. None of them had any expression on their faces. After they appeared, they stood calmly behind Nian Bing and lined up neatly. From them, Halogen felt a bloody aura. The strong murderous aura continued to rise as the number of people increased. Each of them was like a sharp sword that was about to be unsheathed. It seemed that they could launch their strongest attack at any time. Although their eyes were calm, their gazes were like poisonous snakes. Xing Luan already felt that the warriors of the Ice Moon Hall were of high quality. However, compared to the aura of these people, there was a big difference. Looking at their broad palms and similar figures, Xing Luan felt that they were not much different. Halogen could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Were these people from the Yangon continent? From the aura they exuded, it was obvious that they had been trained for a long time. Moreover, they were not ordinary warriors. Their strength was obviously tempered with blood. Killers, this was Halogen's final judgment. Halogen's guess was not wrong. The 500 Blood Guards, as the most elite members of the Blood Lion sect, their usual role was to attack. Once the Blood Lion sect encountered any difficult problems or crises, it was time for them to go out. These 500 Blood Guards consumed a lot of the Blood Lion sect's resources. Even the original 5 halls did not consume as much resources as they did. The Blood Guards were nurtured from a young age by the Blood Lion Hall, the highest authority in the Blood Lion Hall, who sent experts to search for orphans with excellent aptitude. They began to nurture them from the age of 3, and the only message that was instilled in their hearts was obedience and slaughter. Every Blood Guard in the Blood Lion Hall started to serve the Blood Lion Hall at the age of 30, which was also the age when a human's body was at its most perfect. From 30 to 45, they would serve the Blood Lion Hall for 15 years. Once they passed the age of 45, they would immediately leave the Blood Guard team and be arranged by the Blood Lion Hall to become an ordinary person. As for the retired Blood Guards, their status in the Blood Lion Hall was extremely high. Some of them would become the next Blood Guard instructor, while others would take on important positions in the various halls. However, since the establishment of the Blood Guards, less than 1 in 10 would be able to successfully retire in the end. It was obvious how difficult their tasks were. It was also because of this that they, who had experienced the test of blood, were the strongest team in the Dark World. Although there were only 500 of them, even Nian Bing's grandfather, Rong Yen, had said when he obtained the Order of the Fire Dragon that at this stage, the only ones who could destroy the Order of the Fire Dragon were these 510. This did not mean that these Blood Guards could fight against the Order of the Fire Dragon from below. However, the training that the Blood Guards had received had always instilled in them the idea that they would do anything to achieve their goals. Just based on this point alone, even 2 blazing demon dragon knights might not necessarily be a match for them. Looking at Halogen's shocked expression, Nian Bing smiled and said, "Big brother, these are the elites of our Blood Lion sect, the 500 Blood Guards of the Blood Lion sect. Back then, when I helped Yen Feng ascend to the throne of the Ice Moon Empire, the most crucial battle in the palace was completed by them. At that time, although I used various methods to make the palace empty, these 500 Blood Guards were able to achieve the miracle of not losing a single person." Halogen nodded and said, "That's right. Not only are these people strong, but more importantly, the aura they emit is so strong that even I feel a little scared. Nian Bing, your Blood Lion cult is really powerful. In my opinion, if you don't care about the sacrifices, even gods below demigods would not be able to do well against them in a 5-against-1 situation. Demigods referred to gods below level 12. The so-called demigods were those whose strength was between swordsmen and god-tier masters. Halogen's judgment was very accurate. Although these bloodguards were mostly between great sword masters and martial fighters, they were completely capable of taking down swordsmen. Halogen secretly calculated. There were more than 10,000 gods in the godly mainland, but most of them were of the lowest level. Their quality was not even as good as these people in front of him. It seemed that other than the top experts in the Yangon continent who could not be compared to the godly mainland, there were still people who could contend with ordinary god. While Halogen was observing these 500 blood guards, the blood guards at the back gradually walked out. At the end of the line, Halogen saw something strange. The last 30 blood guards were carrying a huge metal frame. He did not know what it was used for. The front of the frame was about 10 feet wide and curved. There was a straight column at the bottom of the column. The bottom of the column was conical and sharp. On both sides of the column, there was a square support. The bottom of the support was covered with cowhide. The 2 blood guards at the front were carrying the frame with their shoulders. From the front of the ark, there was a square metal column about 10 feet long. At the end of the ark, there was a black metal wire. The metal wire was as thick as a thumb. The dwarves were masters of forging. When Shu Luan saw this thing, his mind immediately began to calculate quickly. Especially when he saw the metal wire and the square metal pillar in the middle extending all the way back, as well as the place where the blood guard was carrying it, his eyes couldn't help but flash. He shouted loudly, "Good, it's really good stuff." He couldn't wait to rush forward and touch the huge metal frame. Suddenly, a black light shot out like the fangs of a viper. In an instant, at least 10 thin swords were pointed at Halogen. Halogen's charging body suddenly stopped. A layer of black fighting aura spread out from his body. He felt a sense of danger. The 10 or so thin swords were all pointing at his vital point. However, there was not a single spot that was the same. A strong killing intent locked onto his body. At this moment, he clearly felt that no matter which direction he moved, these thin swords would immediately attack him. Of course, he was not afraid of this kind of attack. However, this threat formed in an instant made him have a deeper impression of these blood guards. Looking at those pairs of emotionless eyes, Halogen could not help but secretly nod. Powerful, really powerful. All of this happened in an instant. Nian Bing hurriedly said, "Stop, they are on the same side." The black thin swords silently disappeared. The blood guards still maintained their orderly formation. Their killing intent was instantly restrained. Even an expert like Halogen felt his body lighten. At this time, he was able to touch the metal frame. With the black fighting aura in his hand, he felt the metal frame on the metal frame, especially the deep curved groove in the middle of the black square column that extended backward. Nodding repeatedly, Halogen's eyes were full of praise. "Good stuff, really good stuff. I didn't expect that the Rangoon continent could also make this kind of thing." Nian Bing smiled and said, "The Ice Moon Empire is the country that is best at forging in the Rangoon continent. Before we came to this mountain range, I talked to the Ice Moon Empire's King Yanfeng and asked him to send someone to make it quickly. Right now, they are still forging in full swing. All kinds of materials are already in place. I believe that before long, all the things I want will be completed. 2 months should be enough." Halogen did not turn around to look at Nian Bing. His eyes were completely attracted by the thing in front of him. While feeling the cold metal, he muttered, "2 people can carry it. The frame can be raised and lowered to make sure the height is not enough. This is a kind of alloy. It is not simple iron. It is made by repeatedly forging fine iron and tungsten steel. Its strength is very good. Moreover, it is made by twisting nearly 100 thin wires. The craftsmanship is very good. Such a big crossbow, even I have seen it for the first time. In the records of our dwarf race, the Lost Continent used to have a similar super heavy crossbow. However, that was an 8-attack heavy crossbow used to defend the city walls. Compared to this heavy crossbow, the craftsmanship is much better. The craftsmanship was even better, and it could shoot 8 arrows at the same time. Even the hardest shield of the formation could not block its attack. However, although this crossbow can only shoot 1 arrow, its attack power is far higher than that of an 8-attack heavy crossbow. After all the elastic force is concentrated on 1 arrow, the power is much greater. However, this crossbow also has its own shortcomings. It is repeatedly forged fine iron, tungsten steel and copper. The resources required are huge. Moreover, when this crossbow is made, the weight is a big problem for the magician. If my judgment is not wrong, the weight of this crossbow is more than 200 kilograms. Nian Bing nodded and said, "Yes, 250 kilograms. Halogen Dage, you are worthy of being a dwarf warrior. Your judgment is very correct. Although the attack power of this crossbow is strong, the weight is the biggest limitation. Without the do chi of a martial expert, it is impossible to pull the crossbow. Although there are 2 moving pulleys on both sides of the crossbow to reduce the pulling force, it is still not enough. Moreover, lifting a 250-kilogram heavy crossbow is not something an ordinary person can do. Therefore, every single heavy crossbow required the cooperation of 3 experts in order to unleash its full power. Moreover, it is only a single attack power. The crossbow is called Death God." Halogen's whole body shook. Hearing Nian Bing's last 2 words, he immediately understood the meaning of Nian Bing. He murmured, "Death God, what a Death God crossbow! Nian Bing, this was designed by you?" Nian Bing nodded and said, "I've been learning culinary skills from my master since I was young. I'm very fond of all kinds of skills, especially crossbows. I'm a mage, so I'm at a disadvantage when fighting against warriors. Unfortunately, I did not have much money at that time. Otherwise, I would have definitely made a crossbow and carried it with me. When I was young, I often imagined that if I could make a super heavy crossbow, even an expert like swordsman would not be able to block it. Of course, the prerequisite is that I can hit the enemy. Thus I had some ideas. Later on, when I had nothing to do, I drew a sketch. Before coming here, I gave the sketch to the king of the Ice Moon Empire, Yen Feng. After he sent the best weapon designer to improve it, this god-slaying crossbow was created. This thing does indeed consume a lot of resources to make. The resources needed for 1 god-slaying crossbow is enough to equip a few heavy cavalry. Fortunately, the Ice Moon Empire is rich in all kinds of ores, so we were able to successfully make these crossbows. We made 10 of them in the early stages." Halogen supported the crossbow with 1 hand and used his other hand to lift the 250-kilogram heavy crossbow. Even the expressionless blood guards at the side could not help but change their expressions. One must know that the crossbow was huge. Halogen was supporting the back of the crossbow, and the front of the crossbow was the heaviest. Therefore, the weight he had to bear now was not as simple as 250 kilograms. Looking at his relaxed expression, it was as if he didn't expend much energy. Furthermore, the god-killing crossbow didn't even tremble in his hands. One had to know that even a Herculean man with 1,000 kilograms of strength wouldn't be able to do this. Nian Bing's hand flashed with a silver light and a half-foot-long arrow appeared in her hand. She handed the arrow to Halogen and said with a smile, "Big brother, I will allow you to test the first arrow. After making this thing, I also want to see how powerful it is. I did not install any tail fins on this Death God crossbow. If it can reach 3,000 feet in a straight line, then I have achieved my goal." Halogen took the iron arrow and looked at it. He could not help but smile and said, "What a big deal! Using fine iron and copper as the body of the arrow and tungsten as the arrowhead. The penetrative ability of this thing is really perfect for this Death God crossbow." Nian Bing smiled bitterly and said, "Yes. This thing is extremely valuable. If it was not to deal with those gods, I would not have asked the Ice Moon Empire to make this thing for me. Give it a try and see how powerful it is." Halogen nodded and placed the crossbow on the ground. He leaned forward and easily pulled the bowstring that originally needed to be supported by one foot. The entire crossbow let out creaking sounds as the front arc gradually bent. He hung the bowstring properly and the entire crossbow was immediately bent. Halogen inserted the death god crossbow that Nian Bing gave him into the front and said jokingly, "Strong enough. I am also looking forward to it." He raised the death god crossbow again. After putting his eyes to the bowstring, he looked at the snowy mountain that was a few thousand feet away. His right hand grabbed the handle below and his eyes flashed as he pulled the bowstring. An ear-piercing sound broke the air as the bowstring buzzed. Everyone only saw a phantom that disappeared in the blink of an eye. Following the disappearance of the phantom, a huge explosion sounded from the snowy mountain almost instantly. Everyone was dumbfounded as they saw the snowy mountain in the distance splashing into a huge cloud of snow. Nian Bing's spiritual power could almost be used as her eyes. She could clearly see that on the snowy mountain 3,000 feet away, there was a huge hole with a diameter of 3 meters and a depth of 3 meters. The power of this arrow was comparable to the attack power of a swordsman. It might even be stronger. Seeing all of this, he could not help but be overjoyed. Halogen narrowed his eyes and looked at the huge hole on the snowy mountain. He handed the crossbow back to the 3 blood guards. His expression fluctuated slightly as if he was thinking about something. Nian Bing walked to Halogen's side and said, "Big brother, what do you think of this thing? It should be quite effective against the god-ranked experts on the godly continent. Moreover, I plan to add some magic to this crossbow." Halogen nodded and said, "After adding magic, the damage will definitely be greater. However, I suggest that you add some single-target magic to make use of the arrow's penetrative ability. If you add some area of effect magic, the damage will be scattered and will not achieve the desired effect. This god-slaying crossbow's straight-line attack range is actually 5,000 feet. Too terrifying. A normal arrow's straight-line attack range is only 500 feet. A hard bow's straight-line attack range is also not more than 100 feet. In the past, the 8-attack giant crossbows of the Lost Continent only had a straight-line attack range of 3,000 feet. The reason why the god-killing crossbow was able to unleash such godlike power was largely due to the materials used to make it. Such strength can only be achieved by these good materials. However, Nian Bing, your god-slaying crossbow has a lot of problems because of its long range. Nian Bing's heart moved. She knew that as a dwarf, Halogen's forging skills were much better than her. She hurriedly asked humbly, "Big brother, where is it lacking?" Halogen said, "There shouldn't be a problem if your 3 subordinates work together to control the crossbow. However, your god-slaying crossbow only has a simple mechanical crosshair. You have to understand that a human's vision is limited. With a distance of 5,000 feet, I'm afraid that even the Lost Continent's elves would have a hard time aiming accurately. And for us to deal with those gods, the most important thing is to attack a magician. It would be best if we could kill them from 5,000 feet away. This god-slaying crossbow's attack speed and range are enough, but without good accuracy, your precious god-slaying crossbow's arrows would only be wasted." Crosshair? Nian Bing indeed did not think about this problem. Hearing Halogen's words, she immediately understood the relationship between distance and crosshair. Indeed, just by using her eyes to aim, she was afraid that only she could use her spiritual energy to lock onto the enemy. But no matter how much her subordinates trained, they would not be able to reach that level of accuracy. Could it be that the god-slaying crossbow that she had ordered people to make with great difficulty would be wasted just like that? Halogen looked at Nian Bing, who was frowning, and smiled. "Brother, don't worry. Have you forgotten what your big brother does? This problem with the crosshair, let me solve it for you." Nian Bing happily said, "Big brother, do you have a way?" Halogen proudly said. We dwarves are not boasting when we call ourselves the masters of forging. Although the accuracy of the crosshair is very high, I am confident that I can make it. How about this, you go to Ice Moon City again and I will write you a list. You prepare everything according to the list, and I promise to put the eyes on these god-slaying crossbows. Oh right, how many god-slaying crossbows are you going to make? Nian Bing smiled at Halogen and said, 600 people, naturally 200 crossbows. I don't want our Blood Lion cult's elites to be injured. The god-slaying crossbows are the weapons they use to deal with gods. Halogen nodded and said, Okay, then I will make 200 special aiming devices for you. But at that time, I will still need the help of your fire magic. Nian Bing nodded and turned to the 500 blood guards, saying, Do you see the snow mountain in front? There are 100 warriors of our cult's Ice Moon Hall who are carrying out the mission to destroy the mountain. From now on, you will also be involved. The goal is to raise this snow mountain to the ground. You 500 people will be divided into 3 teams and meet up with the 3 teams led by Hall Master Yin Dang. He will arrange everything that you need to do and change people every 8 hours. Cycle the mountain. Chapter 217. Yes. The simple one-word answer represented the confidence of the Blood Guards. Compared to the warriors of the Ice Moon Hall, they would not hesitate to carry out the orders of their superiors. Even if Nian Bing ordered them to commit mass suicide, they would not resist. Carrying out orders was the first rule of the Blood Guard. 10 huge god-killing crossbows were placed flat on the ground. 500 people turned into 500 dark red figures and headed for the mountain top. Could the thin black swords in their hands be used to cut open the mountain? Even Nian Bing did not know the answer to this question. Halogen used the pen and paper in Nian Bing's space ring to write down what he needed. Today was the day for Nian Bing to collect iron wire snakes again. Taking the things written by Halogen, he immediately left the snow mountain and headed for the sky-shaking mountain range through long-distance teleportation magic. Time passed day by day. 2 months was a long time, but it was definitely not short. 2 months was enough for a lot of things to happen. Yin Tu and his men were full of greed for Nian Bing's training. Although the Blood Guards never spoke, they were more resolute in carrying out Nian Bing's orders. In the blink of an eye, 1.5 months had passed. The tall snow mountain was only 2/3 of its original size. This result was not expected by anyone except for Nian Bing. In 1.5 months, the mountain that was thousands of feet high had disappeared. When Yin Tu came down from the mountain and saw the masterpiece of himself and his men, he could not help but sigh in amazement. During this 1.5 months, they had been living a repetitive life. Every 3 days, Nian Bing would bring back a batch of iron wire snake. She would boil the snake gallbladder for them to drink and use the snake meat as their meal. Every 5 days, Nian Bing would also bring back a large amount of vegetables for them to eat with the snake meat. Although the iron wire snake gallbladder was directly related to their increasing strength day by day, it was also inseparable from their continuous efforts. After continuously releasing their dou qi and cultivating, they had completely absorbed the energy from the iron thread snake's gallbladder. The effect was actually much better than when Nian Bing had eaten the iron thread snake's gallbladder. After all, they were martial warriors. As warriors who cultivated dou qi, the increase in their strength was very obvious. Now, even they themselves did not know what level they had reached. The operation started after the arrival of the 500 Blood Guards. What the Blood Guards did was very simple. They did not use their own fighting energy to bombard the mountain. Instead, he used his black rapier to help his colleagues from the Ice Moon Hall in the snow. Every time their sword pierced out, their dou qi would completely condense, and the sharp dou qi would directly penetrate into the mountain, reaching a distance of about 3 meters. The strongest Blood Guards could even penetrate a distance of 30 feet. Each group of 160 Blood Guards would launch a piercing attack at the same time before being bombarded by the experts of the Ice Moon Hall. Just like that, every time the Dochi bombarded the Dochi would explode. It would save at least 3 times the amount of Dochi compared to a direct attack, but it could achieve twice the effect. In this way, the speed of destroying the mountain would be greatly increased. Moreover, whether it was the Blood Guards or the experts of the Ice Moon Hall, under the nourishment of the iron thread snake gallbladder, their strength was constantly increasing. That was why the effect was so good now. Originally, after this period of training, the experts of the Ice Moon Hall thought that they could compete with the Blood Guards. However, when the Blood Guards also participated in this training, they gave up on this idea. It was not because their individual strength was weaker than the Blood Guards, but because the Blood Guards made them understand what it meant to be an assassin who started training from the age of 3. If measured by fighting energy, these Blood Guards who were at most in their early 40s were only at the level of a pugilist. There was not even a single swordsman. However, even Yin Zhuang was not absolutely sure that he could kill a Blood Guard at the level of a pugilist in a battle of life and death. The most terrifying thing about these Blood Guards was the invisible murderous aura on their bodies and the tricky way of attacking. No matter how they attacked, their poisoned rapiers would appear in the form of a single point. When a pugilist's Do-Chi was condensed into a single point, the power of the attack would be terrifying. Only those who had faced it would know. Moreover, the Blood Guards were not afraid of death. In their minds, life belonged to the Blood Lion sect. For a person who was not afraid of death, even if you could cut him, his sword would very likely stab you in the vital parts at the same time. Originally, when the Blood Guards drank the soup made from the iron thread snake gallbladder for the first time, Yin Zhuang's subordinates had planned to watch the show. However, when they watched the Blood Guards drink 3 spoonfuls of the fishy soup without any change in expression, they only felt admiration for these so-called elites of the Blood Lion cult. During the extermination operation, the Blood Guards cooperated with the experts of the Ice Moon Hall very well. They did not know the concept of fatigue, and would only rest when they were completely exhausted, and could not even pick up their sword. Under the lead of the Blood Guards, the experts of the Ice Moon Hall trained even harder, even though Nian Bing did not make any special requests. Therefore, after 1.5 months, they had achieved what they had today. There were less than 300 feet of snow mountain left. Looking at the result in front of them, everyone was filled with confidence. If one were to ask who had worked the hardest in the past 1.5 months, those Blood Guards who were desperately splitting the mountain would probably say that it was their leader. Yes, Nian Bing's hard work was obvious to all. Not only did he have to frequently go to the sky-shaking mountain range to collect iron thread snakes, but he also had to go to the Ice Moon City to buy some necessities. When he had nothing to do, he had to constantly work. His work was extremely hard. Other than him, there was probably no other magician in the Yangon continent who could do the same thing. God-killing arrows. Every god-killing arrow had a thumb-sized gem embedded on the arrowhead. The gem was divided into 2 colors, red and blue. What Nian Bing had been doing these days was embedding the red and blue gems on these arrows. Of course, it was not a simple embedding. The embedding was only the first process. Although tungsten steel was hard, it was not much under his heavenly fire that could melt iron and gold. The real difficulty was the process of sealing a detection nightmare spell in the gem. Magic scrolls could store magic. They were originally based on magic crystals and stone powder. Therefore, magic crystals could naturally play the role of storing magic. However, there was a limit to the size of the god execution arrow. The widest part of the arrow was the arrowhead, so the gemstone could only be embedded there. The thumb-sized red and blue gemstones were not very precious. In the Ice Moon Empire, which was rich in ancient minerals, a gemstone like this was worth 2 to 3 purple coins at most. Even if it was a high-quality gemstone, it would be hard for it to exceed 10 purple coins. The amount of magic energy stored in a gemstone was definitely related to its size. Such a gemstone was far from those high-quality magic scrolls. Moreover, The creation of magic scrolls required special craftsmanship. It was much easier to inscribe magic incantations on them. However, it was extremely difficult to seal magic elements on these ordinary crystals and activate them with ingenious incantations. Even if the number one magician in the continent, the former ice goddess priestess Bing Jie, was here, the success rate would probably not be more than 10%. Nian Bing had been doing this for the past 1.5 months. Moreover, the gems on those god-killing arrows contained up to the 9th step single-target offensive magic. The god-killing arrows sealed with the 9th step offensive magic were all genuine god-killing arrows. In the future, the price of a god-killing arrow was probably something that Nian Bing would never have imagined. Using tungsten as the arrowhead, red copper and fine iron as the body of the arrow, and adding a 9th step offensive magic. What kind of concept was this? Halogen had once used the city walls of Ice Moon City as an example. 3 god-killing arrows of the fire attribute were needed to open up a huge hole in the city walls of Ice Moon City that was big enough for an army to charge in. Nian Bing's success rate was so high that it made everyone dumbfounded. She actually had a success rate of 90%. How much spiritual energy did this require? Ever since he saw Nian Bing make the 10th god-killing arrow, Halogen kept saying these 2 words. She was a monster. When he addressed Nian Bing, he also directly called her by these 2 words. In the past 1.5 months, Nian Bing had already made more than 1,200 god-killing arrows while she was busy with other things. That was more than 1,200 spells of the 9th step. Although he didn't deliberately cultivate, the process of making the god-killing arrows was a great challenge to his magical energy, magic control, and spiritual energy. Thus, 1.5 months had passed. Nian Bing's own strength had also changed a little. Although nothing could be seen on the surface, Nian Bing knew in her heart how important this 1.5 months was to her. In this 1.5 months, the things that Nian Bing wanted had been delivered one after another. 200 god-killing crossbows were silently placed in a small valley at the side. That was also the place where Halogen went the most. He would go there every day to take a look and adjust the completed god-killing crossbows to make them more perfect. The dwarven master forger was naturally not a joke. Halogen used some ordinary crossbows to make up for many shortcomings in the god-killing crossbows. For example, he installed 2 iron wheels on the front of the god-killing crossbows. In a situation where there was no vehicle to pull the crossbows and they had to travel a long distance, one person could complete the task of 3 people. He also made some adjustments to the pulleys and crossbows. Under his efforts, the offensive power of the god-killing crossbows increased a little. Of course, the most important thing he did was to install a special sight on the god-killing crossbows. Nian Bing was very busy, and Halogen was a little mysterious. Until now, he still didn't know what Halogen had been doing all this time. Master, 101 men from the Ice Moon Hall and 500 blood guards from the Blood Lion cult are all here. Yin Tu's voice was sonorous and powerful. Nian Bing looked at Yin Tu, whose face was full of beard and hair was disheveled, with satisfaction. She smiled and said, "Hall Master Yin, you've worked hard." Yin Tu turned and stepped aside. Nian Bing glanced at the 600 strongest elites of the Blood Lion cult in front of her. It was definitely not a good thing to not have a bath for more than a month. However, behind their disheveled faces, their eyes were much brighter than when they first arrived. Looking at their energetic appearance, Nian Bing nodded and said, "Time flies. 1.5 months have passed in the blink of an eye. In this 1.5 months, you've achieved better results than I expected. The mission that seemed impossible to complete is about to be completed with your tireless efforts. You are indeed the elites of the Blood Lion cult. From today onwards, the training method will be changed. 200 god-killing crossbows have been completed. It's time for you to test them. I don't think you're looking forward to this moment. I'm the same. So, from today onwards, you'll enter the process of testing the crossbows. Your target is the snow mountain. However, don't be too happy. It's too difficult to make god-killing crossbows. So, you'll use wood to test them. Now you'll team up. Every 3 people, 1 level. Go and carry out our treasures. Everyone will take turns to test the crossbows. Yes. Amidst the roar of acknowledgement, everyone headed towards the colonel. Although they could only shoot wooden arrows, when they thought of the great power of Halogen's arrows that day, even the blood guards, who were unfazed by honor or disgrace, felt their blood boil. In a short while, 600 people carrying 200 heavy crossbows appeared in front of Nian Bing. Looking at their high spirits, Nian Bing smiled and walked in front of a heavy crossbow. She said, "Let me shoot the first arrow. I'll show you the true power of the god-killing crossbow." As she spoke, she walked in front of a god-killing crossbow. With a flash of silver light, a god-killing arrow appeared in her hand. The gem on the arrowhead was red. Wait a moment. Halogen appeared beside Nian Bing in a flash. He smiled and said, "Since we're starting to test the crossbows, it's time for me to show you my hard work over the past few days." As he spoke, he touched the bottom part of the god-killing crossbow in Nian Bing's hand. A cylinder was attached to the crossbow's body. The cylinder was about 2 feet long and as thick as a child's arm. On both ends of the cylinder there was a red gem. The gem was very bright and had a protruding shape. Halogen smiled and said, "This is the scope that I made. Every god-killing crossbow is equipped with it. The accuracy is also adjusted to the best. You just need to put your eyes near the gem at the back and look to the other side. You'll see a black cross appear where the red gem is. With the cross in the center, you can easily shoot any target within 1,500 feet. The god-killing crossbow itself is very stable. Therefore, the arrow shot will be absolutely accurate with the help of the scope." Nian Bing looked at the red gem in surprise. Instantly, she realized that the snow mountain that was originally a few thousand feet away seemed to be right in front of her eyes. She could see the things on the snow mountain clearly. Halogen pinched a round object on the cylinder and said, "Rotate this. You can adjust the distance. If the distance is very close, you can move the gem on the other side. This way, it won't affect the target at close range." The black cross appeared clearly on the other side. In front of her was a transparent red. Seeing the clear scenery and the black cross, Nian Bing couldn't help but praise in her heart. What an ingenious design! With this object, the god-killing crossbow's attack range of 1,500 feet could be maximized. As Halogen spoke, he pulled the bowstring with one hand. The bowstring bent along with the bow frame of the crossbow. He fastened the bowstring, took the god-killing crossbow from Nian Bing's hand, and loaded it into the barrel. He smiled and said, "You can start now. Choose a smaller target. You'll know how accurate this thing of mine is." Nian Bing nodded. She held the cloth on the crossbow with one hand and put the other hand on the trigger. She turned the crossbow gently. Halogen added a circular track on the crossbow between the crossbow and the shoulder. This way, the 2 people in front only needed to stand still, and the person in charge of shooting the crossbow behind them could easily turn and attack in any direction. Soon, Nian Bing chose a position in the middle of the snow mountain. There was a protruding rock there. She pulled the trigger. The sharp whistle that appeared before once again left a deep impression on everyone. It was as if the air was being cut apart by the rapid speed of the god-killing crossbow. The arrow left a trail of afterimages. In just an instant, with a loud boom, the place Nian Bing saw through the scope turned into a sea of fire. Amidst the loud boom, the remaining 3,000 feet of the snow mountain seemed to be trembling. A large amount of ice mist disappeared in the flames as soon as it appeared. The boom was not only because of the god-killing crossbow, but also because of the 9th step single-target fire magic. According to Nian Bing's design, the magic would only be released when the red crystal was squeezed out. For an attack like the god-killing crossbow, it was almost impossible to retrieve every arrow that was shot out. The 2 forces of impact combined into one, and the power that erupted could only be described as terrifying. The flames did not last for too long before disappearing. This time, although they were several thousand feet away from the snow mountain, everyone could see the huge crater. It was 5 feet in diameter and more than 10 feet deep. Compared to the god-killing crossbow, without any magic, the power of the god-killing crossbow was several times greater. Inzue murmured to himself, "If we use this thing to attack a city, one shot will be enough. I'm afraid the city gates won't be able to withstand the power of the god-killing arrow." The ice on the surface of the snow mountain was completely penetrated by the arrow. Through the scope, Nian Bing saw the charred rock inside. She cheered excitedly, "Success, 1+1. As expected, it wasn't as simple as 2. In this environment, the fire element itself was restricted to a certain extent. It actually has such great power. It seems like those gods are in trouble. Even if Nian Bing were to block the god slaying arrows by herself, she would need to focus all of her attention. Furthermore, it would be impossible for her to withstand dozens of arrows without getting injured. Combined with the god-punishing arrow's power, the Tier 9 single-target spell should have the offensive power of a Tier 10 spell at the very least. This was simply the best weapon in war. However, Nian Bing naturally didn't want to use these things to start a war. Instead, she wanted to deal with some people, those gods that she couldn't defeat with her own strength. Halogen took the god-slaying crossbow from Nian Bing's hands. Facing all the subordinates of the Blood Lion cult, he said loudly, "Everyone, look carefully. I will do it 3 times. Now, there is such a scope hidden under every god-slaying crossbow. When necessary, just turn it up and pull it back, and it will enter the slot. At this time, the crosshair is fine, there is no need to move it. The red gem on it has the function of filtering light. It can prevent the glare of the strong light and achieve a better aim." While speaking, he slowed down his movements and performed the action of disassembling the scope 3 times. It was indeed very simple. Everyone understood at a glance. Nian Bing's heart moved, and she said, "Big Brother Halogen, if you inject some light element into the gem on your scope, perhaps you will be able to distinguish the target at night through them." Halogen's eyes shone brightly. He slapped his thigh fiercely and said, "That's right. Why didn't I think of it? Injecting the light element into these magic stones might be difficult for others, but for a monster like you, it couldn't be any simpler. Alright, we can try it first. If it doesn't affect the accuracy, then that would be great. With this thing at night, the god-slaying crossbow can become a sharp weapon for assassination." Nian Bing nodded and said to her subordinates, "All right, from now on, you will line up here and test the crossbow with the goal of making things worse. Everyone will first familiarize themselves with the characteristics of the crossbow, and then take turns to carry the crossbow and pull the string. I will be responsible for the training of the wooden arrows you need. You don't have to worry about it. If there are any mechanical problems, you can ask Big Brother Halogen for guidance. Alright, let's start now." Seeing that Nian Bing and Halogen had each used the god-slaying crossbow once, these elites of the Blood Lion cult had already understood how to use the crossbow. Although the string was extremely hard, it could still be pulled by a martial expert. Therefore, in every group of 3 there would definitely be a martial expert. Each of them fiddled with the huge crossbow mechanism, and immediately became very busy. However, everyone's movements were very careful, for fear of damaging the heavy crossbow in their hands that weighed 250 kilograms. With such a huge lethality, even the blood guards couldn't bear to part with it. For a moment they were immersed in the process of familiarizing themselves with the god-slaying crossbow. While they were familiarizing themselves with the god-slaying crossbow, Nian Bing was not idle. She didn't inject the light element into the god-slaying crossbow's scope first, but instead went with Halogen to the mountain where the god-slaying crossbow was originally placed. A black light flashed in Halogen's hand, and the god-slaying axe appeared out of thin air. He chuckled and said, "Nian Bing, I'll be in charge of cutting the trees. You'll be in charge of making the arrows. What do you think?" Nian Bing smiled and said, "You really know how to choose. All right, you'll be in charge of cutting the trees, but you have to remove the extra branches and leave. I only want the main shaft." Halogen agreed and leaped up. In this world of ice and snow, the trees that could survive were all coniferous trees. The god-slaying axe in Halogen's hand brought out a black light, and as the fighting spirit spread out, the big trees fell to the ground one by one. He didn't even need to get close to Nian Bing. Just by the fighting spirit emitted from the axe, he could easily do everything that Nian Bing asked him to do. Every time he removed all the branches and leaves of a big tree, he would kick the trunk in front of Nian Bing. His movements were extremely fast. However, after a while, Halogen's movements slowed down, not because of the consumption of his fighting spirit, but because he was stunned by Nian Bing's movements. Nian Bing started to move from the first big tree that Halogen kicked. Under the cover of the milky white light, the sacred glory was in his right hand. The weight of the sacred glory was nothing to Nian Bing. As soon as the tree was in front of him, after a short observation, he could use his spiritual power to determine the texture of the tree trunk. When he first started to learn how to cook, observing the texture of trees and chopping firewood was his first practice. Looking at the trees in front of him, he couldn't help but think of his teacher, Cha Ji. As he sighed in his heart, the sacred glory moved. Now, he had an unusually large amount of spiritual power. He could identify the texture of the tree with just a glance and remember it without missing anything. With the memory of his teacher, his knife moved. His wrist trembled. Even with Halogen's eyesight, he could only see an illusory shadow of the knife. In the shadow of the knife, the first thing that flew out was the bark outside. Then, wooden arrows were swept out from another direction by the knife light and fell to the ground in a neat pile. The trunk of a big tree was split into several parts by Nian Bing's lightning-like knife light. Wherever he passed, he could only see wooden arrows floating out. These wooden arrows were exactly the same size and shape. There was no difference. They were the same size and thickness as the god-killing arrow. Halogen was stunned. What kind of knife technique was this? She could actually achieve this kind of chopping at such a fast speed. Every arrow was the same. What kind of precise judgment did this require? Monster. This guy is definitely a monster. Halogen was thinking about this when Nian Bing's voice sounded. "Big brother Halogen, we've used up all the tree trunks. You have to speed up." Halogen was speechless. "You win." Just 2 hours later, the two of them were busy with their work. Tens of thousands of wooden arrows were completed. When the bloodlion sex uncles came to collect the arrows, most people thought that these wooden arrows were transferred from somewhere else by Nian Bing. Only a few people saw the brand new wooden stakes not far away. Only then did they vaguely guess that these wooden arrows were newly made. Half a month's adjustment period quickly passed. To make matters worse, although the remaining 3,000 feet had not been completely destroyed, it was already riddled with holes. When Nian Bing gave each god-killing crossbow 10 god-killing arrows, the 2-month training was over. Each group of 3 people carried a god-killing crossbow and 10 god-killing arrows. Under Nian Bing's lead, they quietly left this cold world. If someone asked where was the coldest place in the Yangon continent, most likely, any person in the Yangon continent would answer. It was the Ice Moon Empire's Polar Ice Province. Yes, the Polar Ice Province was located at the northernmost tip of the Ice Moon Empire. There was only winter here. Even during the warmest time, the temperature would still be around -10 degrees Celsius. And when it came to the cold season, there was even a record of -80 degrees Celsius here. At the southern end of the Extreme Ice Province was a mountain range. The name of the province was the Extreme Ice Mountain Range. This mountain range was the place where the Ice Moon Empire produced the most rare ores. It was also this mountain range that blocked a large amount of cold air from the north, causing the temperature of Ice Moon City and the Ice Moon Empire from the south of the Extreme Ice Province to not be so terrifyingly low. The cold of the polar ice province was really hard to bear. Therefore, the number of people living in this province was less than the number of people living in Ice Moon City. In this province there were only 3 small cities. Only some coolies would come here to mine ores in order to obtain the resources to survive. The 3 small cities in the polar ice province formed a triangle in the center of the province, and in the center of these 3 cities, there was a place called the extreme cold land of the Yangon continent. It was a glacier. The environment was so bad that it was impossible for humans to survive there. Many people had predicted that the reason why the polar ice province was so cold was because of this extreme cold land. The shape of the glacier was very special. There was a large circle of glacier around 3,000 feet high outside. No one knew how long this ice had existed and how thick it was. In the center of this circle of glacier there was a basin. Generally speaking, even if it was a glacier, as long as there was a basin in the middle, then the temperature in the basin would be higher than that of the glacier outside. But it was different here. This basin was the real extreme cold land. The cold wind that was like ice blades formed small tornadoes in the basin. No animals could survive here. Even if they just exhaled, they would immediately turn into countless tiny ice shards. Once they encountered the biting cold ice tornadoes, they would only turn into ice cubes, and then they would end up being blown into pieces by the biting cold wind. Therefore, this place was also one of the famous places of death in the Yangon continent. The extreme cold land still exuded its coldness as usual. The cold airflow could be clearly felt even from 100 miles away. At this time, a large number of black shadows were coming toward the valley where the extreme cold land was located. Their movements were not fast, but they did not seem to be affected by the gradually decreasing cold. They moved forward in an orderly manner. Their pace seemed to be the same. Suddenly there was a look. There were tens of thousands of them all over the mountains and plains. But these tens of thousands of people did not make any sound. When they approached the glacier, they had already begun to climb. A strange thing happened. When these black shadows began to climb, some of them actually had wings on their backs and flew directly to the top of the glacier. And those without wings directly inserted their hands and feet into the glacier and climbed up. The speed of climbing the glacier seemed to be much faster than when they were walking before. If ordinary people saw this strange scene, they would definitely think that these guys were crazy. It should be known that it was already the coldest season on the continent, and in a few days, it would enter the Great Cold Period. At that time, the entire polar ice province would enter a low temperature of -60 degrees Celsius. All work would stop, and this extreme cold land could reach a low temperature of -100 degrees Celsius. This was not a place where people could survive at all. However, because of the low temperature, no one here would see a large number of black shadows suddenly appear and move toward the extreme cold land. Evil Moon floated in the air in silence. He did not wear much clothes. The surrounding cold brought him a very enjoyable feeling. Naturally, he did not like the simple cold, but he liked the innate qi contained in this extreme cold. For a lich, this innate qi was extremely precious. Unfortunately, the innate qi here could only last for a few days every year. Otherwise, Evil Moon would never leave here. The reason why he could cultivate to the lich realm was that he came here every year to absorb the innate qi. It made his body of death extremely strong. Chapter 218. Safin floated beside Evil Moon, and the gray mass of air around him seemed to be more solid than before. Ah, it's so comfortable. Lord Evil Moon, why didn't you bring us here earlier? If we could find this place in the past, as long as we could cultivate here for 10 years, it wouldn't be so easy for those gods to find trouble with us. Evil Moon said indifferently, the innate energy here only lasts for 3 to 5 days a year. Do you think it's here every day? If that was the case, I would have come here long ago. This is the place with the most evil energy in the whole Yangon continent. 2 days later, the day of extreme energy, which only occurs once in several hundred years, will arrive. Then, our chance will come. I need to cast an incantation in the Eye of Extreme Een to absorb the Een energy between heaven and earth to open the seal of Aldos bottle of sealing. At that time, no matter what price we have to pay, you and Sina have to command our army to stop anyone who wants to cause trouble. Safin hurriedly agreed, "Yes, Lord Evil Moon. Don't worry." This time, we joined hands to launch the Blood Moon ceremony to summon an army of 100,000 undead. After my selection and integration, the remaining 10,000 undead are mostly powerful. Most of them are resentful spirit. Their resentment is extremely strong. The evil Een energy here is only suitable for us. It has a suppressive effect on those guys. The Blood Moon ceremony was a very evil incantation in necromancy magic. It belonged to the 13th level of necromancy magic. In order to save his magic power, Evil Moon joined hands with Safin and Sina to launch this evil ceremony. What he summoned were all the dead buried within a certain range. According to the resentment and condition of the corpse, they were divided into several groups. Among them, zombies, vampires, and undead were the main group. Each of them was divided into different ranks. Powerful humans who were alive would become stronger after being summoned by the Blood Moon ceremony. For example, the Zombie King who led the zombies, the Vampire King among the vampires, the Necromancer among the undead. These high-level undead had a certain level of intelligence, but they had no choice but to obey their summoner. As a forbidden incantation, this incantation would cause a lot of anger in the extremely cold places. Once it was discovered, it would inevitably be attacked by all the countries on the continent. Therefore, when Evil Moon made this decision, Sina would hesitate. However, in order to complete the opening of Otis's sealing bottle this time, Evil Moon couldn't care less and resolutely decided to use this ceremony. For this Blood Moon ceremony, they massacred several villages in remote mountain villages in Ice Moon City. Then, he summoned them in a famous graveyard where warriors and magicians were buried. That was how the army of undead was created. After a period of integration, these undead had extremely strong combat power, especially in the air. The air force composed of vampires and undead filled Evil Moon with confidence. Even if they could not kill the 7 Dragon Kings, they could at least play a role in stopping them. Once the process of unlocking the seal was over, everything would become his. The cold could affect humans, but the innate Een Chi here was the favorite of all dark forces. In this place, zombies and vampires could survive without sucking blood, and they would live a better life. The undead army had already entered the glacier. Evil Moon waved his hand, and under the cover of the green fog, he flew into the glacier. Yu and Ping Chao silently followed behind Evil Moon. Yu was wrapped in a thick fur, only revealing her eyes. At this moment, there was no emotion in her eyes. It was a feeling of death. Ping Chao followed her, and his eyes never left Yu. Originally, Evil Moon had promised to let Ping Chao go and live a free life, but Ping Chao did not leave. He was reluctant to part with Yu and insisted on accompanying her at this last moment. Therefore, he also came. Feeling the evil chi around him, his heart became heavier and heavier. He understood that at this time, everything was unavoidable. Since Evil Moon launched the Blood Moon ceremony, he had already understood the determination of this evil lord. His daughter's life could not be compared with his ambition. Just as Evil Moon led his uncles into the land of extreme cold, on a small hill more than 10 miles away, Nian Bing and the others were using the scopes on the god-killing crossbows as binoculars to observe everything. Putting down the scope in her hand, Nian Bing frowned and said, "What does Evil Moon want to do? Where did he get so many uncles? Judging from the situation of climbing the mountain just now, there are at least tens of thousands of people. If there is such a large number of dark cultivators in the dark world, our Blood Lion sect should have received the news long ago. Hall Master Een, what do you think?" Ling Yanbing was puzzled by the sudden appearance of so many dark cultivators. Yin Dang said, "You are right. If there is such a huge evil force as the strongest underground force, it is impossible for our Blood Lion sect not to know it. However, have you looked carefully? The movements of those dark cultivators seem to be too neat. They are like soldiers who are ready to be inspected. Moreover, there is almost no trace of life on these guys. Everywhere they go, there is complete silence. From the looks of it, I'm afraid they aren't true dark cultivators." Of course, Nian Bing felt the silence. There was the purest death energy in his body. Indeed, those dark cultivators who climbed the glacier did not have a trace of life. At first, Nian Bing thought that they were practicing a special cultivation method, but after hearing Yin Dang's words, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. After thinking for a while, Nian Bing said, "You mean they are not cultivators? Could it be that they are undead?" Thinking of the word undead, Nian Bing was shocked. Yes. As a lich, Evil Moon was the most powerful necromancer. If those were undead that he summoned with necromancy magic, then this guy was too scary. It seemed that his thousands of years of premeditation were not in vain. Tens of thousands of undead were gathered in the extremely cold place. It seemed that he could not act rashly. If the Blood Guards and the warriors of Ice Moon Hall were injured, he would suffer a great loss. Thinking of this, his eyes flashed. With a flash of light in his eyes, he had made a decision. He turned to Halogen and said, "Big brother, how about we go there?" Halogen smiled and said, "Okay. I also want to see the lich you mentioned. Moreover, when we are close we can judge whether those guys are undead or not." Yin Dang was anxious and said, "Sect Master, you can't take the risk alone. If you want to go, let's all go with you. We can take care of each other." Nian Bing shook his head and said, "No, Evil Moon's subordinates are all undead. They are definitely not easy to deal with. Against these guys, magicians are much more suitable than warriors. Moreover, although they have many people, they are not in my eyes. Maybe Big Brother Halogen and I can't kill them, but as long as we want to leave, Evil Moon and his people can't stop us. What's more, we are going to negotiate. Don't ask too much. Come here with me. You just need to carry out the orders. The evil dark forces of Evil Moon are terrible, but the guy we are going to deal with is even more terrible than them. All the subordinates of the Blood Lion sect, put the god-killing crossbow and the flame god-killing arrow in place, ready to deal with possible changes. Remember, hide your figures well. If you encounter a dragon flying over, don't attack. Do you understand?" "Yes, Sect Master." Although Yin Dang was reluctant, after 2 months of sharing weal and woe, these subordinates of the Blood Lion sect had increased their understanding and loyalty to Nian Bing. Including him, no one was willing to violate Nian Bing's orders. With the sound of the mechanism, the god-killing crossbow had been set up. In the not-so-dense coniferous forest on the top of the mountain, they had hidden their figures well. Nian Bing glanced at Kitty, whose eyes were twinkling, rubbed her head and whispered, "Kitty, be good. You stay here. Your big brother Halogen and I will be back soon. You have to be obedient. It's very dangerous over there. If Big Brother finds out that you secretly followed him, Big Brother Nian Bing will be angry." He was very familiar with Kitty's temper. The more silent she was, the bolder her thoughts might be. "Wow, Big Brother Nian Bing, how did you know what I was thinking? Okay, I won't go. But you have to come back soon." If there was anyone who had increased their strength the most after 2 months of training, it was undoubtedly Kitty. In the past 2 months, her strength had more than doubled. Not only did she gradually absorb the spiritual power left by her parents, but more importantly, Nian Bing had given Kitty all the magical beasts he had collected from the godly land, including the dark demon rats. She had signed a contract with them, which fulfilled the wish of the 2 dark demon rats to reunite with their children. With more than 10 powerful summoned beasts, all of a sudden, Kitty had become a top summoning magician. It should be noted that whether it was her own summoned beasts or those given to her by Nian Bing, Each of them was very powerful. After telling Kitty what to do, Nian Bing and Halogen jumped up and flew toward the glacier in the snowstorm. Nian Bing found that it was very easy to cast ice magic in this cold weather. Not only was the consumption of magic power incredible, but the magic power was also greatly increased. The speed and magic power consumption of the snowstorm were much lower than that of the flying wind spell. While flying, Halogen said to Nianbing, "Monster, we are not asking a tiger for its skin this time, are we? That guy named Evil Moon is probably not easy to deal with. Are you ready?" Nianbing smiled and said, "Big brother, do you know why I asked you to go with me? It's to gain Evil Moon's trust. I don't think he will refuse 2 masters to join his camp." Halogen laughed and said, "Yes. You monster, you always have a way. I'm just worrying for nothing. You can arrange everything as you see fit. It's really comfortable to have you. I don't have to think too much." The distance of more than 10 miles was covered in the blink of an eye. The closer they were to the glacier, the more obvious the cold feeling was. Even though Nian Bing had ice magic, she was still forced to use the Sky Eye field to protect herself from the cold. At this time, the outside of the glacier had become calm again. The traces left by the undead army had disappeared in the wind and snow. In this cold world, the evil energy made Halogen very uncomfortable. On the contrary, Nian Bing did not feel much because she had the purest death ball in her body. The 2 of them stopped on the glacier. As soon as they stopped, they saw dozens of green lights flying toward them. The evil energy suddenly flourished, and with a burst of screams, layers of spiritual fluctuations of the undead floated toward them. Death, anger, fear, and other negative emotions continued to rise. Dozens of undead launched spiritual attacks on Nianbing and Halogen at the same time. Halogen's willpower was extremely strong. Naturally, these undead could not deal with him. Nianbing stood there without moving at all. Seeing dozens of undead gradually approaching, the Sky Eye point between her eyebrows suddenly shone with golden light, and a strong pressure gushed out in an instant. In the shrill screams, dozens of undead disappeared in an instant, and the surroundings returned to the cold environment. Halogen snorted disdainfully. Attacking a monster like Nianbing with spiritual power, he really could not think of any other way to say it except to seek death. Nianbing stood in place and said loudly, "Evil Lord, an old friend has come to visit, and you use the undead to entertain me?" Under the effect of her spiritual power, her voice spread far and wide, covering the whole basin in the glacier. The undead army in the basin below surged rapidly. Countless undead and vampires flew up and surrounded them from all directions. 2 black figures flew over first. It was Evil Moon and Underworld Witch Safin. Seeing Nianbing appear, Evil Moon could not help but be shocked. "You're not dead." At that time, in the cold valley, Nianbing did not hesitate to use the curse of life to stop him, which left a very deep impression on him. Nianbing looked at Evil Moon calmly, smiled slightly, and said, "Evil Lord, I'm not here to be your enemy this time. What a big lineup. Why don't we find a place to talk?" All of the undead creatures were under Evil Moon's control. He had naturally seen how Nianbing had destroyed dozens of undead creatures in an instant. That golden ray of light made him feel a sense of fear. The young man in front of him seemed to have changed a lot, but what exactly had changed was so mysterious that even he could not pinpoint it. Before he could answer, Safin screamed, "Lord, Evil Lord, this guy is with the 7 Dragon Kings. Let me kill him to prevent future trouble." The gray airflow spread out in an instant with an ear-piercing shriek, and a huge aura of death enveloped Nianbing and Halogen in an instant. Halogen stood there without moving. He knew that there was no need for him to do anything. It was enough to leave everything to Nianbing. Seeing Safin pouncing towards her, Nianbing snorted disdainfully, and raised her right hand. As a dark witch who cultivated necromancy magic at the same time as Evil Moon, Safin's strength was much weaker than Evil Moon, who had a physical body. Necromancy magic was only a branch of dark magic, and its foundation was still the dark element. A seven-colored radiance floated out from Nian Bing's raised right hand, and that black light flashed and disappeared. The huge gray airflow in the surroundings was instantly shrouded by the seven-colored radiance. Nian Bing stretched out her hand, and the seven-colored radiance completely surrounded the gray airflow. The faint golden radiance between her eyebrows exerted a powerful pressure on Safin. He didn't have time to react, and all the gray mist was caught by the seven-colored radiance. He screamed and struggled with all his might, but he couldn't break free from Nian Bing's control. Safin panicked. His spiritual imprint was firmly suppressed by Nian Bing, and he couldn't display the strength he should have. And the seven-colored radiance that caught him was constantly weakening his aura of death. That uncomfortable feeling made him feel fear. Nian Bing didn't even look at Safin, and turned to Evil Moon. Lord Evil, I think we can talk now. For dark forces, there was nothing more effective than force. Evil Moon's eyes flashed with a dark green radiance. What a good innate domain. You've become much stronger than the last time we met. You've become much stronger. However, if you're here for the 7 Dragon Kings and Miorda's bottle of sealing, then there's only one conclusion. If that's the case, there's only one outcome for you. Do you think that a mere Xiantian domain is enough to convince me? Then you're looking down on me too much. Nian Bing chuckled and said, I've already said that I'm not here to be your enemy, but to discuss some things with you. What if I say that I'm here to help you? Evil Moon was stunned. Although he had made all kinds of guesses about Nian Bing's arrival, he didn't expect Nian Bing to say something like that. He couldn't help but ask in surprise, Help me? You're so close to the 7 Dragon Kings, and you're even willing to use your life to protect them. You're going to help me? Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? As he spoke, a large number of vampires had already surrounded Nian Bing and Halogen. Nian Bing said calmly, Yes, I'm here to help you. I'm friends with the 7 Dragon Kings, but in the face of major issues, I have my own stand. Of course, you can also understand that I'm not here to help you. I'm here for the Yangon continent, and also for the lost continent that has been lost for many years. Don't tell me that even with your identity as the Evil Lord, you don't dare to talk to the two of us? This won't do you any harm if we don't reach an agreement. It won't be too late for you to order your subordinates to attack me. If our negotiation is successful, you'll have 2 more helpers. Why wouldn't the Evil Lord accept such a good thing? His tone was very calm, and there was no flaw in it. The unfathomable smile on his face made Evil Moon unable to understand his real meaning. There was no doubt about Evil Moon's ability to create today's situation. But in order to open Miorda's bottle of seal, he had put in a lot of effort. At this critical moment, the arrival of Nian Bing brought him a strong sense of crisis, so he was so nervous. After listening to Nian Bing's words, his mind gradually relaxed. Yes, there were only 2 of them. He had nothing to be afraid of. Immediately, Evil Moon nodded and said, Well, come with me. The surrounding vampires dispersed. Nian Bing flung Safin to the side with a wave of his hand. He leaped up with Pai Luan and followed Evil Moon into the ice valley. As they gradually descended, Nian Bing could feel the harsh environment. The closer they were to the extremely cold land below, the stronger the feeling was. The strong cold current, under the effect of small tornadoes like ice blades, constantly attacked everywhere. In the army of the undead, except for the undead who didn't have a physical body, everyone was covered in a layer of frost. In the distance, he had already seen the center of the basin. There was a faint grayish-blue airflow rising up, and in that place, a large number of undead were surrounding it. Some of the undead were busy doing something. Evil Moon landed on the ground with Nian Bing and Halogen. Sina, the vampire queen, and Safin, the underworld wizard, rushed over and looked at Nian Bing and Sina vigilantly behind Evil Moon. The surrounding undead were dispelled by Evil Moon. He said indifferently, You can say what you want now. If you really want to cooperate with me, then show me your sincerity. Otherwise, how can I believe you? Nian Bing smiled and said, Since I have the courage to come here, of course I am very sincere. Lord Evil Lord, how confident are you in opening Miordas's bottle of seal? Evil Moon said proudly, At least 70%. Although the 7 Dragon Kings are powerful, you have seen my arrangement here. Although I dare not say that my undead army can destroy them, at least I can stop them until I complete the opening of the seal. I have been preparing for this day for too long. This time, no matter what price I have to pay, I must complete it. Nian Bing nodded and said, Since you have the desire to open the seal and bring back the lost continent, then I think you must have some understanding of the War of the Gods. Have you ever thought about the situation of the continent of gods after you get the 7 bottles of seal from Miordas? They will let you bring back the lost continent. The lost continent connects the Yangon continent and the continent of gods. The return of the lost continent is a great threat to the continent of gods. Evil Moon frowned and said, Don't be an alarmist here. Yes, the continent of gods and the lost continent are mortal enemies. However, the continent of gods also has a rule that you can't leave their seal at will. Nian Bing smiled and said, It seems that Lord Evil Lord has a lot of research on the continent of gods. Yes, you are right. The continent of gods does have such a rule. However, the seal can't be opened under any circumstances. When what you have done has threatened the existence of the continent of gods, do you think they will continue to ignore it? I can tell you now that the continent of gods has broken its own rule. A total of 12 gods have come to the Yangon continent, looking for your traces everywhere. You have hidden very well, they can't find you. However, you are preparing to open the seal here. There is only one place in the land of extreme Een, don't tell me they won't find you? 12 masters whose strength is not inferior to the Dragon King crown, plus the 7 Dragon Kings. I'm afraid your arrangement is not enough. Listening to Nian Bing's words, Evil Moon was shocked. If what she said was true, that the 12 gods had come to the Yangon continent, then he really didn't have a chance. Evil Moon probably knew what kind of strength the gods had. As Nian Bing said, when he threatened the existence of the continent of gods, it was normal for the continent of gods to react. Thinking of this, Evil Moon's heart couldn't help but feel cold. However, deep in his heart, he still didn't want to admit that this was the truth. How can you make me believe what you said, just based on your one-sided story? Nian Bing smiled indifferently and said, I know you are wondering how I know this. In fact, I just came back from the continent of gods. Maybe you don't believe that I have been there, but you also saw what happened at that time. Why can I come back from the dead? It is because the dragon god took me to the continent of gods to seek medical treatment for my kindness to the dragons. That is why I can come back alive. Before coming here, I have met 2 gods and personally experienced their strength. One of them was a powerhouse who had reached the 13th level at the level of gods. He had already reached the 13th level, and we had to work together to kill him. Do you know why I wanted to kill the deities? Because once the seal of the continent of gods completely disappears, it will bring a great disaster to the Yangon continent. In the War of the Gods, although it's hard to say who was right and who was wrong, the lost continent bravely started a war with the godly continent for their own freedom. Oh, they would rather let the lost continent return and have a chaotic war with the godly continent than to let the Yangon continent, the world I live in, suffer even the slightest bit of harm. This is why I chose to cooperate with you. Whether you believe me or not, in 2 days, my words will be verified. However, by that time, I'm afraid it will be too late for you to cooperate with me. Now, you can only bet that I'm not lying to you. Evil Moon fell into deep thought, and the vampire queen, Sina, also fell into deep thought. Only Underworld Witch Safin shouted, Well, don't talk nonsense here. I think you must be a spy sent by the 7 Dragon Kings. You want to infiltrate our inner circle. When the time comes, you will cooperate with the 7 Dragon Kings. Lord, evil Lord, you must not believe him. Otherwise, he will bring destruction to us. Nian Bing glanced coldly at Underworld Witch Safin. His gray mist was much dimmer than before. Under the weakening effects of the Sky's Eye domain, he wouldn't be able to recover to his peak condition for at least 6 hours. Safin, don't you dare act arrogantly in front of me. You may have lived for thousands of years, but I'll be honest with you. One of the gods that came from the Yangon continent is the sacred teacher. Do you think he will let you go? Safin's body shook. Last time, when the sacred teacher activated the Holy Radiance Blade, he had just woken up and his strength was far from recovered. He was almost turned into nothingness by the holy aura of the Holy Radiance Blade. He had an innate fear of the sacred teacher. When he heard Nian Bing say those 2 words, his arrogance was immediately restrained. At this moment, Nian Bing waved her right hand, and a black light lit up. Evil Moon was instantly on alert, and the green light in his eyes turned blood red. However, the black light was not attacking him, but transforming into a figure. The figure was exactly the same as Nian Bing, except that everything was black. Gradually, the black figure changed into the figure of a middle-aged man. His face was resolute, and his whole body was filled with invisible killing intent. He coldly looked at Underworld Witch Safin. Shut your stinking mouth. After so many years, you still haven't made any progress. With Nian Bing's strength, there is no need for her to waste words with you. If you want to die, I can fulfill your wish at any time. The cold voice was filled with tyrannical killing intent. Underworld Witch Safin's gray mist instantly stopped moving. At least 10 times more fear than when he heard the words sacred teacher filled his body. Big brother, is it you? Is it really you? You didn't die. You actually didn't die. The gray mist condensed into an illusory human figure that knelt in front of the black figure, the gray light constantly trembling. Evil Moon's eyes were filled with astonishment. Of course, he knew that there was only one person in this world who could be called Big Brother by Underworld Witch Safin. That was the leader of the 8 heavenly kings of the dark forces, Emperor Kurobutsu, who had once defeated the Dark Dragon King Kageyoshi in a duel. That cold, killing intent and deep gaze filled Evil Moon's heart with astonishment. How could Emperor Kurobutsu be here? Looking at him, he didn't seem to have a corporeal body. With a flash of black light in his hand, the demon-devouring blade had already jumped into Emperor Kurobutsu's hand. Gently stroking the blade, he said indifferently, "Safin, get up. Seeing that you were once my brother, I won't do anything to you. However, you have to watch your mouth. Now, Nian Bing can be said to be my master. If you insult her again, don't blame me for not remembering our brotherhood." The demon-devouring blade suddenly swung out. A powerful suction force enveloped Underworld Witch Safin. Safin screamed. A dark red light penetrated his body and disappeared in the light emitted by the demon-devouring blade. Emperor Kurobutsu cast a glance at Evil Moon. What a tyrannical curse. It seems that my brother didn't sincerely submit to you. Evil Moon, in my eyes, you're just a junior. I tell you in the name of Emperor Kurobutsu that everything Nian Bing said is true. It's up to you to decide. Cooperation requires both sides to show their strength. His blade had already dispelled the curse that Underworld Witch Safin had when he submitted to Evil Moon. At this time, Underworld Witch Safin was no longer under Evil Moon's control. All of this was already within Nian Bing's plan. Indeed, everything that Nian Bing said before was true. Chapter 219. Safin's upper body floated up, but his body was still trembling. Compared to Evil Moon, he trusted Emperor Kurobutsu more. If it wasn't for Emperor Kurobutsu, he would have died countless times already. There was at least one thing he was sure of: Emperor Kurobutsu wouldn't harm him or use him. In a sense, Emperor Kurobutsu didn't seem like a person of darkness. Although he was extremely domineering, he had never lied in his life. Whether it was his enemies or his brothers, none of them doubted a single word he said. Safin looked at Evilmoon's doubtful gaze and hurriedly said, "Lord Evil, this is indeed my big brother. Although he no longer has a physical body, I will never forget his aura. Only my big brother has such an aura. Big brother, how did you survive? Back then, I thought you were already dead. You're finally back. Your brother missed you so much. Back then, there were 8 of us, but now there are only 2 of us left. Big brother, don't abandon me this time." Compared to being controlled by the evil lord, how could it compare to following a big brother who loved him? Emperor Kurobutsu said indifferently, "I indeed couldn't resist the god's punishment back then, so my physical body was destroyed. But the moment my body was destroyed, I pulled out my spirit and soul and entered a deep sleep in the demon-devouring blade. You idiot, I was always by your side, but you only cared about your own cultivation. Fortunately, Nian Bing picked me up, and his courage gained my recognition. Under the effects of his innate energy, I was gradually awakened and absorbed some dark energy, gradually recovering. Now I'm just like you, an energy body." Evil Moon looked at Safin and Emperor Kurobutsu, his eyes flashing. He knew clearly that Emperor Kurobutsu's appearance made it very difficult for him to control Safin. Moreover, the situation in front of him was no longer under his control, because Safin had his own magical restrictions. So, during the Blood Moon ceremony, apart from the vampires who were under Sina's control, most of the undead army were under Safin's control. Safin no longer needed to be controlled by him, so he would definitely stand on Emperor Kurobutsu's side. And Emperor Kurobutsu also called Nian Bing his master, so he had no other choice. Moreover, the Black Martial Emperor had never told a single lie in his records. If Nian Bing really wanted to work with him, then why should he fall out with them? Thinking of this, he immediately made a decision and immediately put on a smile. "Congratulations to Emperor Kurobutsu for reviving. With your affirmation, I'm naturally willing to cooperate with brother Nian Bing." When Nian Bing made up her mind, she had already discussed with Emperor Kurobutsu about Safin. That was why there was this scene in front of her. She looked at Evil Moon's flashing eyes. She knew that although Evil Moon seemed to have compromised on the surface, he actually didn't really agree to cooperate with her. Now that Safin was under Emperor Kurobutsu's control, it meant that he indirectly controlled part of the undead. With her own 600 subordinates and 200 god-killing crossbows, Nian Bing was confident that she could completely destroy Evil Moon and his undead army. However, she couldn't fall out with him now because only Evil Moon knew how to summon back to the Lost Continent. Therefore, she had to use him to achieve her goal. She patted Halogen's shoulder and said, "Big brother, we should also let the Evil Lord see our sincerity. Lord Evil Lord, this is my big brother Halogen. He came back with me from the godly continent." Big brother Halogen's ancestors had participated in the Great War 10,000 years ago. Moreover, his ancestors came from the Lost Continent. This time, part of the reason for this operation is to let my big brother return to his homeland. With big brother Halogen here, I think you should be able to trust us. I'm sure you've heard of the dwarf clan's persistence. Dwarf clan. While Evil Moon was puzzled, he saw a yellow light leave Halogen's body and float into Nian Bing's hand. It turned into a simple long sword. Halogen's real body appeared in front of him, wearing a black armor and holding a black battle axe. "That's right, I am the last dwarf on the godly continent. Helping my homeland return is my biggest wish in life. We don't need to lie to you about this. It's not that I'm looking down on you, but not to mention those god-ranked experts, even if the 7 Dragon Kings used their full strength to attack with draconic magic, your undead army might not be able to resist for long. If we were with the 7 Dragon Kings, there would be no need for us to come here and talk nonsense with you." As he spoke, the god-slaying axe in his hand chopped into the air. A black light that was 10 feet wide broke through the air and rose to a height of several thousand feet. The coldness of the extremely cold land seemed to be cut apart by this act. Several ice tornadoes that were enveloped by the axe light were instantly cut in half. The wind and snow scattered, as if they were separated into two worlds. Seeing this scene, Evil Moon couldn't help but be shocked. With such a large range of fighting power and the ability to extend more than 1,000 feet, this dwarf alone was enough to match him, not to mention the existence of the unfathomable Nian Bing and Emperor Kurobutsu. If he joined forces with these three people, his chances of success would naturally be greatly increased. Just as Halogen said, if they were with the 7 Dragon Kings, there was no need for them to come here to discuss with him. With them cooperating with the 7 Dragon Kings, his undead army might not be able to resist. Thinking of this, the last trace of doubt in his heart disappeared. Well, since you are so sincere, we can work together to complete the return of the lost continent. However, if it's as Nian Bing said, at least 10 god-ranked experts have come to the Yangon continent, plus the 7 Dragon Kings. I'm afraid that even if we join forces, we might not be able to stop them from destroying the plan. Do you have any good ideas? Nian Bing said, I already have some plans, but I hope to know the specific method you used to open the sealing bottle of Miorda's. Only then can I cooperate with you better. Evil Moon's heart skipped a beat. He looked at Nian Bing with a different gaze. He wasn't a fool. Naturally, he considered the possibility that he would end up benefiting someone else. A genuine smile appeared on his face, and the dark red light returned to its dark green color. It's actually not difficult to open the seal. The key is time. I need at least an hour to complete the curse to open the seal. As for the specific situation when opening the seal, I am not very clear. In the ancient records I found, there is only a simple way to open it. So, the first priority of our cooperation is to stall for time. Looking at the smile on Evelmoon's face, Nian Bing naturally understood that he would not reveal the truth to her. What he said about half an hour should be true, or perhaps, it might be shorter than half an hour. Thinking of this, Nian Bing smiled and said, Okay, then let's bet on this half an hour. At that time, Sir Evil Lord can launch your spell to open the seal. As for the task of resisting the 7 Dragon Kings and those gods, leave it to me and your undead army to complete. We will cooperate with each other. As long as we delay for half an hour, the lost continent will be able to return. At that time, everything will be much smoother. Evil Moon could not wait for Nian Bing to say so, and hurriedly said, That's the best. Then my wife, Sina, and Safin will be in charge of the undead army and cooperate with your actions. Nian Bing nodded and said, In that case we will go back first. At the latest tomorrow, I will bring my people to the valley and be in charge of the outer defense. Don't worry, I won't let my people enter the basin. Before that, I hope that you can let your undead subordinates carve out 200 caves with a diameter of about 10 feet on the ice wall inside the glacier for my people to hide. Evil Moon said, That's easy. Safin, I'll leave this matter to you. You can also send them off while you're at it. Evil Moon naturally had his own plan, but Nian Bing's arrival made him understand that the plan needed to be changed. Safin knew that after his spell was lifted by Emperor Kurobutsu, he could no longer gain Evelmoon's trust. Without saying anything, he took Nian Bing and the other two to the valley outside, and only stopped when they reached the top of the glacier. Big brother, thank you. Safin's voice was full of emotion. If there was anyone in this world that could make him treat sincerely, then perhaps it was only Emperor Kurobutsu. Emperor Kurobutsu waved his hand and said, You don't need to thank me. If you want to thank someone, thank Nian Bing. I will contact you again. As long as you do as I say in the future, we will still be brothers. I will still be your big brother. At least, follow me and Nian Bing. No matter how this matter is resolved, we will do our best to keep you safe. Go, but don't stay too long. Evil Moon will be suspicious. Safin smiled bitterly. Big brother, you helped me remove the curse, so he's already suspicious of me. Evil Moon won't trust anyone easily. Big brother, if you really want to work with him, you must be on your guard. Until now, no one, including his wife, has been able to find out the secret to unlocking the seal of the sealing bottle of Miota's from him. I only heard that the opening of the seal seemed to have something to do with his daughter. Don't worry, I will definitely find out the truth. As for the 200 ice caves you want, I will make them as soon as possible. Nian Bing said, Safin, let's not be calculative about what happened in the past. Let bygones be bygones. Although I don't like you, Emperor Kurobutsu told me that you were the one with the least bloodshed among the 8 heavenly kings of the Dark World. Therefore, I think that there is still a chance for us to cooperate. Can you tell me how strong Evilmoon's undead army is? Safin's body, which was made of gray mist, slightly fluctuated. He sighed and said, I don't like you either, I even hate you. However, I have to admit that you are already stronger than me. Seeing your strength, I really think that I have lived in vain. The 10,000 undead army in the Ice Valley were all selected and merged with each other. They are very strong. I think that any country's army that wants to fight against this undead army will have to pay a heavy price. On the surface, among the 3 parts of the undead army, I control the undead and zombies, and Evilmoon's wife, Sina, controls the vampires. However, among the 10,000 undead, the most powerful ones are the Zombie King, the Necromancer King, and the Vampire King. They are all under Evilmoon's control. They are his magic weapons to fight against the 7 Dragon Kings. Don't underestimate the kings of the undead army. Not only are they intelligent, but they were also great masters when they were alive. Even I am only equivalent to 3 or 4 of them at most. If they attack together, the 7 Dragon Kings' draconic magic might not be able to do much. Evilmoon is a cautious person. If he wasn't confident, he wouldn't have come here so easily. Actually, you have been fooled by him. He already knew that the continent of gods would send people here, but he still insisted on coming here. He must have something to rely on. As far as I know, Evilmoon is the most outstanding lich ever since the invention of undead magic. He hides himself very well. You have to be careful. Don't be used by him and get hurt. Nian Bing nodded and said, I know what to do. Okay, we will go first. We will come here tomorrow to set up. I think that the gods and the 7 Dragon Kings are probably nearby. The reason why they haven't made a move yet is because they are afraid that Evilmoon will escape with Miota's bottle of sealing. So, they will definitely wait until Evilmoon starts to open the seal. After reminding Safin, Emperor Kurobutsu merged back into Nian Bing's body. Together with Halogen, they floated away in the snowstorm. Looking at their backs, Safin couldn't help but sigh. 2 days later, the chaos would begin. No one could predict the final outcome. The original 2 sides had evolved into 3 sides. He didn't know if Nian Bing and Evilmoon could resist the attacks of the Dragon King and the gods if they worked together. In fact, Safin's judgment was somewhat wrong. The dragons and the gods didn't have a good relationship. So, the current situation should be 4 sides, not 3. Early the next morning, Nian Bing brought her subordinates to the glacier. The elites of the Blood Lion cult had trained in the cold snow mountain for more than 2 months. But compared to the snow mountain, this place was much colder. Fortunately, they had drunk a large amount of iron thread snake bile, which made their bodies much stronger than before. In addition, Nian Bing had prepared clothes for them to resist the cold, so they were barely able to withstand the cold. The 600 people were split into 200 caves. They were divided into groups of 3. Their god-slaying crossbows were placed at the entrance of the cave. After making some simple modifications to the ice caves according to the required attack form of the god-slaying crossbows, they rested in the ice cave. Nian Bing sent the warm items that he had prepared into every ice cave. Together with the food that he had prepared, his efforts were in place. At this time, the only one who hadn't arrived in the Ice Valley was Kitty. Even Halogen didn't know where Nian Bing had sent Kitty. Evilmoon didn't appear, nor did he care about what Nian Bing and her subordinates did. However, Nian Bing knew that Evilmoon must know what she had done. Nian Bing also had her own thoughts. No matter what Evil Moon had left behind, the most important thing for her was to be able to withstand the attacks of the gods and the 7 dragon kings. As for what would happen when Evil Moon was summoned, she would have to rely on herself. With the god-killing crossbows and the zombie army, she didn't have much to worry about. What the 200 god-killing crossbows needed to do was to slow down the attacks of the god. Now, the most important thing for Nian Bing was to grasp the timing of Evil Moon's summoning. Only then could she achieve her goal. She and Halogen had become the final decisive force. Now there was also Safin. At the critical moment, under the influence of Emperor Kurobutsu, he should be on her side. In the cold valley, under the hazy sky, Ling Nianbing was not used to the cold air. She and Halogen were both sitting in an ice cave and meditating. The decisive moment was coming. When night fell, the temperature in the ice valley began to drop rapidly. If Nianbing hadn't prepared for her subordinates, they probably wouldn't have been able to withstand the cold. The atmosphere in the ice valley was very solemn. Time continued to pass, and the undead army, which was not afraid of the cold, began to move in an orderly manner. Around the top of the ice valley, zombies with spears were patrolling everywhere. The air was filled with ghosts and vampires who were in charge of scouting. Their blood was cold, and an austere and terrifying atmosphere filled the ice valley. At this time, this place could be called the Valley of Death. Yu Yu was wearing a long black dress. Her hair was neatly draped over her back, and a black pearl necklace hung around her neck, which made her look more radiant. However, her big eyes were filled with a deathly stillness. She and her father had been standing in the middle of the ice valley beside the ice cave, which was constantly emitting extremely cold air. The evil atmosphere was getting stronger and stronger. The green light around Evil Moon's body completely enveloped him and his daughter. The stronger the yin qi was, the greater the benefit for him. The rich green light was constantly emitted. Every time it fluctuated, it could not only dispel the surrounding cold air, but also absorb some of the evil atmosphere to replenish itself. Yu Yu, do you remember the spell that Dad told you? Evil Moon asked in a low voice. Yu Yu didn't speak, but nodded silently. Evil Moon sighed and said, "Daughter, don't blame Dad for being cruel. If there were other ways, I wouldn't have chosen this. Dad promises you that if you can be safe after completing the spell this time, no matter what you want to do in the future, Dad will not stop you. Even if you want to be with Pingqiao, Dad will help you." Yu Yu said indifferently, "I understand the meaning of the word sacrifice. I am a sacrifice, Dad. You don't have to say any more. I understand everything, and I will never hold you back. My life was given by you, and it's nothing to give it back to you now. However, you have to remember what you promised me. In any case, you must save Brother Pingqiao's life and let him go when things here are over." Evil Moon nodded silently and said, "Don't worry. Although I am not a man of integrity, I will abide by the spell of the dark world. Now the evil atmosphere has begun to rise. As long as the yin qi appears, it will be the time for us to take action." Yu Yu did not speak again. She slowly closed her eyes, and 2 drops of crystal tears fell from her face. Although she was protected by the energy of Evil Moon, when the tears fell, they still condensed into 2 clean ice crystals and fell to the ground, smashing into pieces. Whether it was Nian Bing or Evil Moon, at this moment, they were all waiting for the arrival of the final moment. The sky gradually brightened from the extreme darkness. The dark clouds above the ice valley prevented anyone from seeing the face of the sun. However, the dawn before the storm still appeared. At this moment, the whole ice valley seemed to have completely turned into a gray world. The first to act was not Evil Moon, who was guarding the Eye of Yin, but Nian Bing. Nian Bing didn't expect the evil aura to be so domineering. When he sensed the change in that instant, he released his heavenly eye domain without any hesitation. 7-colored light completely enveloped the ice cave where his subordinates were. Only with the help of the pure magic elements did they manage to isolate the evil aura. Nian Bing sucked in a breath of cold air. He knew that if he had been just a little slower, his subordinates below the martial saint realm would have lost a portion of their battle prowess. Furthermore, if they had been taken advantage of by the evil Qi, they would have suffered irreparable damage to their bodies. At the same time that Nian Bing launched his sky eye field, Evil Moon also moved. Under the gaze of Nian Bing's psychic energy, he waved his sleeve. 7 black lights appeared in an instant and fell steadily around the cave entrance. They were the 7 Miorda's sealing bottles. As soon as the 7 black bottles appeared, they were contaminated with the Yin Qi and emitted a faint golden light from the bottle openings. Evil Moon shouted in a low voice. His eyes instantly turned blood-red. He bit his middle finger and flicked 7 drops of green blood at lightning speed, which were printed in the center of the 7 bottles. Suddenly, the golden light rose in an instant and condensed in the air. Then, the golden light quickly enlarged, and a golden light column with a diameter of 3 feet soared into the sky. A low buzzing sound rang out like a Sanskrit chant. Every nerve in Evil Moon's body tensed up at this moment. The critical moment was finally coming. Yu stood up straight. At this time, there was a strange blood-red pattern between her eyebrows, exuding a dark red luster. Without waiting for Evil Moon's order, she had already lifted her foot and stepped into the golden light. At the same time, she also walked toward the Eye of Evil. "No, Yu, don't." A shrill voice sounded, and a figure rushed over like lightning. Evil Moon's eyes flashed with a bloody light. He raised his hand and released a red light full of evil Qi, which immediately bombarded the figure and sent it flying. Yu's whole body shook. She withdrew her right foot, and her dead eyes were full of emotion at this moment. She looked back at the body that had been sent flying. Evil Moon said hurriedly, "Hurry up, don't waste time. Don't worry, he'll be fine. I promised you." Yu took a deep look at her father. Then she glanced at the direction where Ping Chao had been sent flying. She knew that Evil Moon would not lie to her at this time, so she did not hesitate. She finally took the step that she had taken back. When her graceful and delicate body entered the hazy golden light, she did not fall into the eye of ice. Instead, she floated in the golden light and floated in the middle of the 7 Miorda's sealing bottles. Silently, she floated half a foot above the ground. Her hands formed into claws, one above the other, and faced her chest equally. Tears once again fell from her eyes. They were not tears of sadness, but tears of despair. Just as Yu entered the golden light, the change that Evil Moon had been wary of finally happened. 2 streams of Qi, one green and one yellow, suddenly appeared from the left side of the ice valley. Fighting Qi broke out in the air and scattered into a rain of light. More than 10 figures appeared in mid-air, and an invisible pressure was exerted. Even the evil Yin Qi was unable to approach them. Hundreds of spears were hurled out from the hands of the zombies. The spears carried a sickly green radiance, and when the yellow-green specks of light fell from the sky, they erupted with a faint halo. It looked like a thin green veil, instantly pervading the dozen or so figures. However, it was precisely this layer of faint light that floated and blocked the spears that were hurled at them. No, to be precise, it should be smashed. When the spears came into contact with the green light, they did not leave a trace and disappeared into thin air. The huge pressure expanded, blocking the ghosts that were about to rush over. A low voice sounded, "Evil can never defeat justice. If you violate God's will, death will appear in front of you. Ghosts in the dark, why don't you put an end to your childish idea? Could it be that you have to die without a burial ground before you know how to repent?" Although Nian Bing was far away from the guy who suddenly appeared, when she heard this voice, she could not help but be shocked. Because this was the voice of the sacred teacher. In the air, the pure white light wrapped around the sacred teacher's high-spirited body. Including the sacred teacher, there were a total of 11 people. Although the light around the sacred teacher's body was not the strongest, he was in the center position. Every word he spoke carried a pure aura, causing the surrounding ghosts and spirits to continuously retreat. The sacred teacher's holy aura was the nemesis of these ghosts. The gods finally appeared. There was one more person than Yen Bing expected. Judging from the energy emitted from their bodies, it was still within Yen Bing's expectations. If Theron had not died at their hands, he could be regarded as a powerhouse among this group of people. There were a total of 11 people, at least 7 of whom had reached the 13th level. With such a powerful combination, it was no wonder that they dared to face an army of 10,000 ghosts. Evil Moon didn't seem to hear them. He didn't move at all. His hands were constantly changing all kinds of hand gestures. Streaks of dark red light were accurately injected into each sealing bottle of Miotas. The golden light emitted by the 7 Miotas sealing bottles gradually merged with some dark red color. Yu didn't seem to notice anything that was happening in the outside world. She finally started chanting her incantation. She looked up at the sky. Her hands were still in their original position. A blood-red light appeared between her 2 claws. Her voice was very low, but it was also very calm and very slow. Every word that came out of her mouth was very clear. Most High God, King of Flame, King of 3 Horns, formation of please, hear my prayer of me. Although she chanted each word very slowly, her face became paler with each word, and the blood-red light between her claws became stronger. A layer of faint black mist surrounded her body, and the blood-red symbol on her forehead became clearer. Under the cover of the extreme Yin-Chi, at this time, she was like a queen in the darkness. Yuyu's incantation was so clear that Evil Moon, Nian Bing, and the 11 gods led by the sacred teacher naturally heard it as well. When she chanted the 5th word, the sacred teacher raised his right hand, and all the 11 gods launched an attack at the same time. Without exception, they all used Do Qi. Red, blue, yellow, green, silver, white, black, every attribute of Do Qi existed among these gods. Their movements were so fast that even Nian Bing was surprised. The light of Do Qi didn't spread over a large area, but every Do Qi attack brought out a long gully. The Do Qi filled the sky, and the ghosts surrounding the gods were instantly dispersed by the sacred teacher's holy aura. As for the zombies that were madly rushing towards them, they didn't even have the chance to fall to the ground before they were ground into fine powder. And at the same time when the gods launched their first attack, Nian Bing also sent out his own signal. At this moment, although he respected the sacred teacher, he couldn't have the slightest hesitation. Although the gods were powerful as he had expected, the simultaneous attack of 11 experts of the 12th and the 3rd step was still very shocking to him. Moreover, the 7 Dragon Kings hadn't appeared yet. Once these gods rushed into the Ice Valley, Yuyu's ritual could be interrupted at any time. When Yuyu started to chant the incantation and floated in the golden light, Nian Bing discovered that he had seen this girl before. Looking at her pale face, Nian Bing felt a trace of uneasiness in his heart. But at this time, there was no time for him to hesitate. The gods in the air not only brought great pressure to Evil Moon, but also to him. Nian Bing waved his hand, and at the same time when the first wave of attacks from the 11 gods wiped out all the zombies on one side of the Ice Valley, 100 red phantoms quietly appeared. Just when the 11 gods launched their attacks at the same time, the 100 phantom-like rays of light appeared. The range didn't expand, and they were all aimed at the 11 gods in the air. As the first attack, Nian Bing didn't add any tricks to his plan. This was because he knew that the gods were extremely arrogant. When facing an enemy, they wouldn't easily dodge. Therefore, this first wave of attack was also the most effective one. A total of 100 fire element god-killing arrows quietly appeared. The dark red light didn't give the gods much time to react. Among the 11 gods, even the sacred teacher didn't put up much of a guard. 7 of them didn't pay attention to the red light, but condensed their Do Qi in preparation for the next attack. Only 4 of them faintly felt that something was wrong and released the energy that had just risen. Chapter 220. A shocking scene appeared. The sky above the ice valley, which was full of evil chi, turned red in an instant. The huge roar was accompanied by the shattering of the yellow-green barrier under the deities. Only 5 god-killing arrows had broken the barrier below them. The remaining 95 arrows did not stop at all. They had already arrived in front of the deities the moment the barrier was shattered. The continent of gods was a place full of danger. Over there, everyone had to constantly guard against the attacks of magical beasts and their own kind. Although the gods were arrogant, they also had extremely high vigilance. When the violent explosion sounded, when the sense of crisis assaulted them, they made the fastest response in a split second. No one could describe that gorgeous scene. Unusually gorgeous fireworks appeared in the sky. The milky white radiance instantly filled the air. Gold, red, blue, and green radiance were the main 4 colors. In an instant, a dazzling light burst out. However, although these lights were gorgeous, they could not compare with the red light that covered the sky. The aura of fire instantly caused the temperature of the entire ice valley to rise sharply. On the side of the deities, the ice valley, which was 300 feet high, disappeared in an instant. All the deities, without exception, were blasted thousands of feet away by the huge shock force. Evil Moon's expression changed. The chill in the ice valley instantly weakened, but the evil Een energy wasn't affected. However, what had just happened left him dumbfounded. Of course, he knew who had done it, but he never expected that Nian Bing would be of such great help to him. Seeing this scene, he could not help but be a little absent-minded. Initially, his heart had sunk when the 11 gods had appeared. Although Nian Bing had told him about the number of gods, he didn't fully believe him. It was only when the gods launched their first wave of attacks and easily destroyed thousands of enemies that he realized that he had made a mistake in his prediction. However, before he had the time to regret his mistake, Nian Bing's voice suddenly rang out in the air. Nian Bing had already given him a big gift. Evil Moon saw the red light. The sky was full of red light. The energy that burst out was the most gorgeous scene he had ever seen in his life. He knew that he was wrong. He had underestimated Nian Bing too much. To be able to reach such a level of attack, Evil Moon was very surprised. Only then did he truly acknowledge Nian Bing in his heart. This was because he knew that if this attack was directed at him, then he wouldn't even stand a chance. Raising his head, Evil Moon looked at her daughter. The golden light of Miorda's sealing bottle was still there, and it was not affected by the red light in the air. Faintly Yu's first incantation had just ended, and she began to chant the second. Before dawn today, except for Evil Moon himself, even Sina didn't know. The real host of the ceremony to open Miorda's sealing bottle was not Evil Moon, but Yu, who was the sacrificial ceremony. Faintly Yu's voice was unusually calm. After the completion of the first incantation, the bloody light between her claws had expanded a lot, from a drop to a small ball. Her face was paler, but the black airflow around her body became more condensed. Her eyes had turned blood-red at this moment, and the blood-red light was full of the breath of death. This girl, who had already transformed into the Queen of Darkness, began her second chant, and also began the process of her becoming a sacrificial ritual. Honorable King of Demon, Flame, King of 4 Horns, Formation, Commander of me, please answer my plea. Faintly Yu's voice was still so low. It was still so clear in all directions. However, compared with when they heard her chant the first incantation, the mood of the 11 gods at this time had completely changed. When they heard Faintly Yu chant the first incantation, they were very relaxed. They had been in Yangon for some time. No matter what kind of human beings they faced, they were invincible and invincible. On this continent, they had not met any forces that could compete with them. Although they did not know why they had lost 2 companions, with their cold temperament, what did it matter to them if their companions died? Before coming here, only the sacred teacher faintly felt that it would not be so easy to get back Miorda's sealing bottle this time. Unfortunately, no one would agree with his idea. When they heard the incantation to start the ceremony, they knew that it was impossible to stop the ceremony. Therefore they appeared. The first wave of attack, which was like a stalemate of ants in their eyes, was eliminated. Just when their arrogance was rising, a destructive blow suddenly appeared. The 11 deities were frightened out of their wits. They suddenly realized that they were so close to death. At that moment, all of them unleashed their strongest potential. 6 of them who had already opened their Fangjia acupoints instantly expanded their defense to the maximum. In order to save their lives, they couldn't care about anything else. Below, the beautiful light that Nian Bing saw was actually not all their Do Qi. Most of it was the defensive spells that they had refined on the godly continent. Thousands of meters away, the 11 deities all spat out blood at the same time. Based on their reaction speed and strength, they had already suffered different degrees of injuries. However, what made their hearts ache the most was the loss of their protective spells. At least half of their defensive treasures had been used up, and most of them had been destroyed by the violent bombardment. Waves of scorching hot air rushed into their bodies. If they hadn't been living in the harsh environment of the continent of gods, they would have lost their ability to fight by now just from the scorching and crazy fire attribute aura alone. Compared to the shock of the gods, Nian Bing frowned. He was not satisfied with the result in front of him. He was very clear about the attack power of the god-killing crossbow. It was not that he did not want to release 200 crossbow arrows at once. However, under the situation where the gods were standing so close together, if he released all 200 god-killing crossbows at once, some of the energy would be cancelled out in the collision. The effect might not be better than 100 god-killing crossbows. In Nian Bing's original prediction, these 100 god-killing crossbows were the most important part of his plan. He only had this one chance to make use of the god's pride. And only this one chance could let them take on the attack of the god-killing crossbows head-on. At first he thought that this wave of attacks was enough to at least kill the weaker deities. However, things didn't go as planned. Under the protection of the 11 deities' extraordinary will to live and under the protection of the law of body protection, not a single deity was fatally wounded. In the distance, the gods outside of Zhejiang were in a very bad state. Not a single one of them was wearing tidy clothes. Some of them had even turned into the color of charcoal. However, this did not make Nian Bing feel any better. Instead, it made him feel even heavier. He knew that the impending revenge of the gods could only be dealt with the number of god-killing crossbows. At this moment, Nian Bing and the gods heard the second line of the spell being chanted. What attacked us just now? This was the same question in the hearts of all the gods. They all cherished their lives very much. Therefore, among the 11 people who were thousands of meters away, only the sage master was rushing back. The other 10 gods were floating in the air, using their Do Qi to support their bodies. While treating their injuries, they were also carefully observing the situation in the ice valley. They were not willing to joke around with their lives. However, just as the gods were preparing to continue waiting, a voice rang in their ears. After hearing this voice, the light in the eyes of the gods changed. Without any hesitation, the 10 of them followed the sacred teacher and rushed back. The second line of the spell was still being chanted slowly. At this moment, the slim figure beside him was trembling non-stop. It's them, it's them. Brother Nian Bing, you must help me kill them. They were the ones who killed my parents. There's no one at the front, but the ones at the back have all appeared in our home. Nian Bing turned back to look at Kitty. His gentle eyes were filled with consolation. He said calmly, Kitty, your enemy is your brother's enemy. As long as I can do it, today will be the day of our revenge. His voice was not loud, but every word was firm and powerful. Hearing Nian Bing's promise, Kitty's agitation gradually calmed down. Looking at the tall figure beside her, she took a deep breath. She knew that she would never be able to seal it. Brother Nian Bing in front of her. At this moment Nian Bing moved. A blue stream of air carried his body and floated out. At the ice cave that was originally protected by his Heaven's Eye domain, a layer of Do Chi appeared at the entrance of the first ice cave. With Nian Bing's warning, under the circumstances of being prepared, the Do Chi defense would not be so easily penetrated by the evil Yin Qi. In just a few flashes, Nian Bing was already in midair. The snowstorm made his speed extremely strange. Floating in midair, Nian Bing directly faced the sacred teacher. The sacred teacher looked a little strange at this moment, because his complexion was not too good. Anyone who had just been bombarded by the God-punishing arrow would not have a good complexion. "It's you?" The sacred teacher's eyes revealed a somewhat puzzled expression. Nian Bing smiled slightly and said, "Isn't it me? Senior sacred teacher, we meet again. However, this time, I'm afraid that we are enemies and not friends. Could it be that you must stop this ceremony from being completed?" The shock in the sacred teacher's eyes disappeared before the other gods arrived. He said coldly, "This is our mission. Could it be that you want to see a scene of suffering and suffering? Miorda's bottle of sealing cannot be opened. Otherwise, you should be very clear about the consequences." Nian Bing said leisurely, "Of course I am very clear about it. However, I still want the lost continent to return. Could it be that if Miorda's bottle of sealing does not open, you gods will not cause suffering and suffering? I don't know if Senior Sacred Teacher has any feelings after returning to the Yangon continent. I think he must have. Compared to the godly continent, this is heaven. I don't know how long the seal on the godly continent can prevent your gods from returning to heaven from hell." The sacred teacher's expression changed slightly. He naturally understood the meaning of Nian Bing's words. His expression became somewhat complicated, but at this time, he did not have any other choice. Without waiting for him to open his mouth, a tall middle-aged man with a black aura appeared in front of the sacred teacher in a flash. He looked at Nian Bing with disdain. "Human, you are also a lackey of the undead. Since that is the case, you should go to hell. Everyone, hurry up and do not disobey the will of the gods. Spread out and be careful of sneak attacks." The prestige of this black-clothed man seemed to be much higher than that of the sacred teacher. Under his command, except for the sacred teacher, the rest of the gods instantly spread out and rushed down from different directions. Nian Bing did not move, but his spiritual power was connected to his subordinate. At this moment, a red and blue intertwined net appeared, and the place where this net appeared was the ice wall on the other three sides. The 200 god-killing arrows were not targeted at the gods. Although the shooting speed of the god-killing arrows was as fast as a phantom, Nian Bing was very clear that this speed alone was not enough to stop an expert above the 12th level. This was because above the 12th level, the speed of warriors could break through the limit and reach another level. Nian Bing also had this kind of speed, so he naturally knew what kind of situation to use and what kind of method to use. The moment the red and blue intertwined net appeared, Nian Bing's body disappeared in a ball of silver light. To him, every second of delay was a victory. Although he had only exchanged a few words with the sacred teacher, he was still able to delay the enemy for a few seconds. When Nian Bing reappeared, he was already beside Kitty, and the red and blue intertwined net had already exploded. Under the control of Nian Bing's spiritual power, whether it was ice or fire, every god-killing arrow contained the same amount of magical energy. Furthermore, they all had the same attribute of ice and fire. What would happen if 50 fire-type god-killing arrows and 50 ice-type god-killing arrows collided in the air in an instant? Perhaps only Nian Bing would be able to imagine it. The two god-killing arrows had two completely opposite attributes. Under the intense collision, the energy that could be released was much more terrifying than the fusion of ice and fire. And at this moment, Nian Bing launched such a terrifying attack. The violent explosion was several times louder than before, because this time, the explosion was caused by the fusion of ice and fire. The huge amount of energy formed a huge explosion in an instant, encompassing every corner of the ice valley within a radius of several thousand feet. The huge explosion did not dissipate, and the explosive effect produced in an instant was comparable to that of 10 powerhouses of the 13th level. The large explosion naturally could not injure the gods like before, nor could it bring about such a huge impact. However, it was enough to just force them to retreat. The impact of the collision between the 9th-level god-killing arrows had reached the 11th level under the amplification of the fusion of ice and fire. What was the 11th level? It was a forbidden spell. The power of 50 forbidden spells exploding at the same time was unimaginable. Moreover, such an explosion was limited to the center of the ice valley. Such a violent explosion caused the various magical elements in the air to go berserk, and a magic storm with ice and fire at the center continued to wreak havoc. At the same time that the gods were sent flying, a trace of doubt appeared in their hearts. Was this still the radiant continent? Could it be that they had returned to the continent of gods? It was a pity for the remaining zombies that were wandering around the peak of the ice valley. Under such a degree of explosion, they were turned into dust, just like the gods when they first appeared. The peak of the ice valley instantly turned white, but the violent magical elements caused the gods' expressions to become extremely ugly. Although they were forced to retreat, the anger in their hearts had reached its peak. At this moment, a figure silently appeared behind the retreating gods. This figure only had one target, and it was a 12th-level god who could barely be called a demigod. He was the unluckiest person to be hit by the god-killing arrows, and he also suffered the most damage. When the second explosion sounded, he was like a bird that was startled by the twang of a bow. They were also the first to retreat. Flying with Do-Chi was a very tiring thing to do. Facing such a large-scale magic explosion, although they were strong, they were all warriors. Facing such a magic attack head-on, they were all warriors. The damage they received was unbearable, so he was the first to retreat. When this unlucky god felt the space behind him fluctuate, he already felt a cold chill. The next moment, he found a headless body floating and rolling in the air. Then, he saw a headless body floating and rolling in the air. Then, the body disappeared in silence, leaving no trace behind. The last thing he felt in his life was that he had entered a boundless darkness. In this darkness, he discovered that death was not so scary after all. The silver light flashed again, and the pitch-black figure disappeared along with the fan-shaped black light. At this moment, the other gods finally realized that the pair of primes behind them had turned from 11 to 10. Almost all of the gods thought that this must be the doing of Nianbing. However, in that violent tremor just now they really did not have any way to rush in. Such a violent magic was wreaking havoc. In addition to the huge explosive force, they were still humans after all, and the plutonium was the sea god. There was a limit to what they could withstand. With their strength, they could only rush in with the plutonium. Perhaps this would only be temporary, but at the very least, there was nothing they could do. Just when all the gods were on high alert and observing their surroundings, they discovered that Yuyu's second incantation had ended. The entire space was in a temporary silence. Other than the whistling of the cold wind and the explosion of magic elements, there was not a single sound of human voices. Silence, a deathly silence. Hovering in mid-air, Yuyu could clearly feel that a formless energy was continuously flowing into her body. This energy seemed to come from the 7 Miorda's sealing bottles. Although this energy was continuously flowing into her body, at the same time, it was also constantly pulling something out of her body. This indescribable feeling made the sadness in Yuyu's heart continuously disappear. The world around her seemed to become clearer. She could clearly see Nianbing's appearance, clearly see Nianbing commanding her subordinates to launch the god-slaying arrow net to force the gods to retreat. However, all of this did not make her feel anything. At this moment, she could even clearly see the agitated magic elements in the air, the distance and relationship between them. This was a wonderful feeling. Although she found that her body seemed to be weak, but in between breaths, she found that everything in front of her was somewhat hazy. She seemed to have seen another world, a world full of green. Yu didn't stop. She naturally didn't know what was going to happen next, nor did she want to know what was going to happen next. However, her incantation continued. With Nian Bing's help, she continued to chant the incantation that her father had taught her. Great, dark, flame, king, 5, Mang, array, partner, please, promise, my heart wishes. At this time, Evelmoon's mood was nervous and excited. Looking at his daughter chanting the incantation word by word, he knew that his dream was getting closer and closer. Every word in the incantation would bring him one step closer to becoming the king of the lost continent. However, he was now a little afraid. The god-killing arrows had left a deep impression on him. The god-killing arrows could explode in the air and repel all 11 gods. He could also shoot towards the ice valley. With that kind of power, he was afraid that his undead army in the valley would not be left behind except for a few strong ones. Although he was nervous and excited now, he did not have any doubts about Nian Bing. He knew that if that young man wanted to do something to him, he would definitely not make an enemy out of the gods. He even killed one of them. Evil Moon was waiting. At the same time, he was also making arrangements. How could he only rely on this army to protect his hopes of so many years? The sound of the third incantation seemed to be slower than the previous 2 incantations. At this time, the bloody red ball in the middle of Yuyu's 2 claws had grown a little bigger. Although it was only a little, Yuyu's aura had become even more different. From her body, Nian Bing could feel the pure power of death, and her own life aura was indeed quickly draining away. The golden light emitted by Miorda's sealing bottle made Nian Bing feel very strange. Even with his Heaven's Eye domain, he was unable to detect the attribute of the golden light. It was like the gray energy that Oscar's body emitted when he first appeared, making people unable to grasp it. The golden light in front of his eyes revealed a bit of a strange aura, and that aura seemed to be gathering towards Yuyu's body. At this time, Yuyu seemed to be a little bigger than usual. It was the volume of her body that had increased. If one looked carefully, they would be able to see that it was not her body that had increased in size, but the black aura around her body had become the same shape as her body, and not the oval shape that ordinary people emitted. In that black light, the blood-red symbol between her eyebrows was exceptionally clear, and the red light in her eyes had become even more dazzling. Her 2 claws were parallel to each other in front of her chest, and Yuyu's aura was still very stable. However, perhaps because the black light around her body was too intense, the golden red light emitted by Miorda's sealing bottle had now turned into a black halo. Nian Bing naturally saw the changes in Yuyu. However, he already had no time to care about when Yuyu's incantation would be completed. Instead, he saw 10 angry gods. After being thwarted twice in a row, the aura of the gods had changed. The energy around their bodies fluctuated unstably, and Nian Bing could even see that the acupuncture points on their bodies were emitting different kinds of light, bringing them even more energy. The gods did not approach again, but the energy they were condensing was becoming more and more enormous. What were these guys trying to do? Nian Bing's heart was filled with doubts. He had never underestimated the gods. In the face of so many masters, he knew that if he was not careful, he would lose the whole game. Of course, Nian Bing would not let his side sacrifice too much. He knew that he had Evil Moon behind him. Once he could not resist, he would leave the threat to Evil Moon to deal with. The gods were floating there. Fighting Chi was very energy-consuming to fly, but most of them had opened the West Meridian acupoint, and the congenital Chi in the air was constantly replenishing, so it was not very difficult for them to fly. The sacred teacher's voice was a little low. "Are we really going to do that?" The man in black who had angrily rebuked Nian Bing before snorted and said, "Of course, do you have a better way?" Only by completely destroying this place can we achieve our goal. You saw those arrows just now. Can you be sure how many are left? As long as those arrows are still there, we can't rush in at all. The archers should be hiding on the ice wall. I really don't understand, when did the Yangon continent have so many powerful magic archers? If they all attack, we may not be able to gain an advantage. So, destroying this place now is the best way. The sacred teacher frowned and said, "This ice valley is not simple. It can seal the eye of extreme cold and extreme heat inside. There must be something special about it. Once we destroy this place, I'm afraid the cold air will leak out, and it may affect the climate of the Yangon continent. Who knows how many ordinary people will suffer because of it? Do we really have to do that?" The man in black said disdainfully, "You are too soft-hearted. Don't you see that our companions have already died? We don't want to be the next. In order to complete the orders given by our superiors, we have to do this. If you don't want to, get out of the way. We will deal with it naturally. Brothers, let's destroy this ice valley and see if there are any magic archers who can stop us." During the first wave of attack, they didn't see clearly what attacked them, but when the blue net appeared in the second wave, they saw the appearance of the Death God arrows. After all, the Death God arrows were not as powerful as a large group of experts. Seeing that it was just arrows, they relaxed a lot. However, facing the power of the Death God arrows, they had no other choice. If they couldn't rush in, it meant that the incantation would be completed continuously, and their mission would be ruined. That was something they couldn't and didn't want to see. The 9 balls of Do Chi emitted a dazzling light as they condensed. It was no longer just the Do Chi of the gods, but also the condensed energy from the West Meridian and Middle Meridian. Whether it was the Xiantian Qi or the condensed Do Chi, they all had terrifying attacking power. Although the ice valley was not small, the man in black was not boasting when he said that he would destroy it. If 9 gods worked together, they could definitely do it. When Yen Bing saw the huge amount of energy condensing, his expression changed. His subordinates were hiding in the ice wall. Against such an attack, the Death God arrows could not block it. The only thing he could rely on now was himself. However, those were 9 deities they were talking about. Yen Bing also thought of the problem that the sacred teacher thought of. The temperature in the ice valley was so low. Once they went out of the ice valley, the first to suffer would be the elites of the Blood Lion cult. His preparation was not inadequate, but Yen Bing didn't expect that the gods would use such an extreme method. Evil Moon certainly didn't care about this method, but he couldn't ignore it. Tai Yi wanted his subordinates to place the god-slaying crossbows on the surrounding ice valleys, but even though the elites of the Blood Lion cult were strong, they were not undead. Their bodies could not withstand such a cold and evil environment. Even if they really set the crossbows, they wouldn't have any attacking power. Thinking of this, Yen Bing whispered a few words in Kitty's ear, and then rushed out without any melancholy. In a flash, he had already arrived outside the ice valley. Looking at the gods who were constantly condensing energy hundreds of feet away, Yen Bing moved. At the same time, 7-colored magical power condensed from the surroundings into his body. The middle meridian acupoint operated at full strength. Under the cover of the expanding 7-colored light, 7 faint figures appeared with 7 divine swords. Like stars surrounding the moon, they surrounded Yen Bing in the center. At this moment, Yen Bing wished that he could recover the physical attack of his spiritual power. Although the gods in front of him were strong, they were much weaker than the true gods on the continent of gods. Even the god of order had been stopped for a moment because of his spiritual power attack. Against these gods, it was very likely that he could kill a few of them. Then, it would be much easier for him to face them.